Okay. All right, I'd like to call our Finance and Audit meeting for September 8th to order at 8:30 a.m. We have all members present except for Tom, Mr. Wilbeck. We have minutes for approval. I'll entertain a motion. Larry moves, Kelly seconds. Any concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Public comment? Anyone want to speak? Any public from the public? I guess not. All right. Member comments?
I have one.
Lori?
Because I'm still getting situated. I just had a question, and I thought rather than asking it for every resolution, I was just curious, noticing that in the past, figures used to be in the resolutions when there were dollars attached to things, and it just seemed like more often than not, there is no longer dollars in the line item of the resolution, or even just in the line item, not in the long narrative. So I didn't know if there was a change or if it's not needed in the line items. So that was just my member comment rather than asking it for every.
So when you say, can you explain what you, I'm not understanding what you mean by in the line item.
Well, like in the agenda bullet point, if you will, as opposed
so,
to.
like here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
we're not talking about the actual resolution itself.
No. Right, the heading, yes, thank you for
Okay.
helping me find the words that are not coming this morning, but, so it's not a criticism, it was just a curiosity. If it doesn't have to be there, because it is in the other resolutions, then that's fine. It just seemed like it used to be there in the past, so that's all it was.
Okay, that's fine.
Just a curiosity.
All right. Any other member comments? Okay, Mr. Wilbeck joined us. We're on to routine consent agenda, items to be removed from routine consent. Carlos?
6.16.
1 to 6. Okay. Any others? Steve Kelly?
6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.12, 17, and 19, please. Did you just sigh?
I did. I did. Big sigh. Go ahead. Anyone else? Larry?
6:10.
10. As my wife says, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Anyone else?
11 and 18.
Okay, we only have like 6 left, so anyone else? No?
No, I think all mine were.
Okay, so the ones I don't have pulled are 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, and 15. Is that correct? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve those. Steve makes that motion. Larry seconds that motion. We go to vote. Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. Okay, we are on to item 6.2. I'll entertain a motion. Steve makes that motion. Kelly seconds that motion. Kelly, you pulled this one?
I did. Just curious, so this, I know they haven't, the Board of Review has not, salaries haven't been increased since 12, but I'm just wondering how we came to 12% and
15.
I'm sorry, 15%. You're right. And how often do they meet and just things like that? I just want to know more about the board.
They meet very regularly during periods of the year. They don't meet all year. They meet very regularly during periods of the year. I worked a little bit with Bob Ross on this and kind of trying to arrive at an issue. I honestly thought we might just go to 40. He backed it down, using a modest annual increase over the last decade, kind of arrived at 15%. I can try and get Bob up here if we need some more. That was not anything particularly scientific, just knowing that it had been a decade since they got a wage increase.
How many members are there?
There's 3 primary board review members, I believe.
And then there's alternates when they can't make it.
And what does frequently mean when they meet? Once a quarter, 5 times a year?
No, it's more like 3 or 4 times a week for half of the year.
Well, I don't know if it's that much, because it's based on appeals. So if there's a lot of appeals that year,
It's a lot.
well, but I'm just saying, I think it depends on how many appeals there are. So if there's a lot more appeals, Grafton Township used to have 10,000 appeals because of the assessor. So, I'm sure they were meeting almost year round then because of that situation. But if they don't have a lot of appeals, then they still meet, trust me, but it's not as much, I guess.
I just think with our, sorry,
No, that's okay, if you're not done.
I just think with the budget considerations that we have, 15% just seems a little excessive to me.
I agree.
I agree.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I was gonna pull this one too, before Kelly did it, the 15%. And I'm not saying that they haven't had the raise for a considerable amount of time, but it doesn't seem like we're having troubles getting people to fill that position at that dollar amount. We have, it looks like four qualified people that are willing to be the backups of this and be called in as needed. I think the 15% is a little high when we have qualified people willing to take that position. It's not like we're pricing ourselves out of the market by not giving them a raise.
Okay. Are there other comments? So does the committee want to amend the resolution and still pass something, or there's no appetite to even amend?
Well, I guess if I could ask maybe, and Peter, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know you said offered to get Bob to join
I
us.
just emailed him, so
Okay.
I don't know if he's in the building.
Okay, because I guess I'm wondering, it's a board of review members, so are they appointed, are they elected, are they hired by Bob?
Appointed by you.
They're appointed by us, okay. Yeah, I guess this was, seeing this was hard to swallow, given our conversations that we've had about our salaries. So, I don't know, I don't have an amendment, so I'm done.
Yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
Can I just make the suggestion, at least for right now, that we move this to the end of our list of topics and see if maybe Bob can make himself available, and then vote on it towards the end of our agenda?
Well, we can, that's fine, we can just suspend the discussion on this one, and I won't take a vote on anything, I'll just move it, we'll still talk about it at the end, I don't care, that's fine with me. Okay, we'll move to item 6.3 then.
That one's me also, I just.
Hold on a second, I need a motion in a
I'm
second.
sorry.
So moved.
Larry, Carlos, Kelly,
Just had a question, is Cheryl here? So my question just was, it says under here that there's different eligibility versus salary versus hourly. Salary was 1 month and hourly was 60 days. Is that something we're choosing to do, or is that what is within that 125 plan, like the requirements?
It's something we've done historically, and I think we've encountered a few issues in terms of attraction, and that have kind of prompted this discussion. These positions are all funded 100% when we budget for them, but when we talked a little bit about this at Administrative Services as an issue that it's kind of helps us with attraction and retention a little bit more on the attraction side than Cheryl wanted to see done. And we have made a distinction in the past between exempt and non-exempt employees, and with that 60-day lag, it can get up to like 89 days if you get hired on the wrong day. So because it starts on the next health insurance month. So it was something that HR wanted to see.
So when you're talking about attraction, you mean attraction as for exempt employees?
Non-exempt more. This is putting them in line with one another.
Sorry, I guess I'm still confused, because if hourly is longer, I mean, you have to work longer in order to get the benefits, correct?
Right.
What is standard, like in the practice?
It starts on the health insurance starts at the beginning of the next month.
It's nothing I can change, I just was curious, I just figured if somebody's working full-time hours, no matter if they're hourly or exempt, they should probably have
And
this.
we're putting them in sync now. Isn't that what we're doing?
No, it says 1 month for salaried and 60 days for hourly.
But that's redlined? I mean, that's crossed out, so it says hire date? Is that,
You know, the intent is now to have everybody start the following month from their hire date to get rid of that 60-day lag time.
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I read it.
The intent was
Must be
to make
reading this
everybody
wrong.
on the same program.
Okay.
On page
Oh,
16, there's a
yes.
chart.
Okay,
with
so
some-
that's why when I was read and saw this, I understand. Thank you, sorry.
Carlos?
Although Cheryl didn't use the word discriminatory, she did kind of imply that it could become problematic because we were treating employees differently, and that it could become problematic based on the requirements of something. But yeah, she was like, it was brought to our attention that we really shouldn't be treating people different. Everybody should do one way or the other. We chose to go one way.
I read it incorrectly, I apologize. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go to vote. Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries. We're on to item 6.4. I'll entertain a motion. Steve makes a motion. Larry seconds the motion. Kelly?
Yep, me again. So there's no report with this resolution, and it says when we approve the resolution that we're approving the report.
So the report would be 2 lists, one from the Democratic Party, one from the Republican Party, of judges that they would like to commission, along with a letter certifying that list. We just received that from the Republicans. I know Mrs. Zahoric is on the 5-yard line of getting hers done, and so it will be, I would hope soon, Mrs. Zahoric, but it'll be there before the county board meeting.
Okay. So personally, I can't vote yes for this if I don't see a report because I'm approving something I don't know what's on it.
That's up to you, that's fine.
Larry?
What's the time frame on this, Joe? I mean, if we don't approve it this month, it seems like this is after the fact anyway, so does it matter if we?
So the statute says it's supposed to be done in July. And then the statute says that it needs to be certified to me by the parties 20 days prior to the July county board meeting, which would have put us on the 30th of June, which would have been 2 days after the conclusion of the primary. Long story short, I think when they compressed this election schedule, they hadn't figured this particular exercise in it. So they obviously weren't ready to give us this data then. They're ready or nearly ready now, and so we'll take it to you guys. If you approve of it, then we hand it over to the state's attorney who takes it to the court, and if the court approves it, then they become commission judges. If it doesn't happen, then the prior commission stands until they're replaced.
Well, I guess I'm sort of thinking like Kelly, if we don't have it, we don't have it. Yeah, I know you expect to get it, but things get delayed.
Yeah.
I would either table this for 30 days or won't know, I guess.
What, can we table it? I mean, can we decommission them in 30 days?
So I would really encourage you not to. I don't know, and don't take this the wrong way. I don't know what you would have to add in terms of qualifying these people that the heads of the party haven't already done. So you can, obviously, it's your prerogative to vote for or against whatever you want to vote for. But what you're really doing is if you vote against it or if you delay it, then you're denying the parties the opportunity to commission judges in this election.
We put it under old business?
Well, I'm just going back to the time frame thing that I was asking about. When do the judges have to be commissioned? I mean, you're talking about state's attorney to the court to get approved, so now it's going to drag out past the November election?
Oh, no. I'd imagine that would take place in a week, barring any unforeseen circumstances.
I mean, whether we vote it up or down, it's still gonna go to the board. If you don't have the
Right.
data before the board, then you pull it at the board meeting and say, we're not voting on it because the data's not there. I mean, I don't,
Right.
I don't.
Right, and if you know, Mr. Thorson, who represents the Republican Party, has brought us his data. If Ms. Horick just chooses not to, that's her prerogative as well, you know. So
I was with understanding she had sent you the.
she had sent, we exchanged some feedback on some of the things she sent, and so she's working on finalizing that list. So, like I said, I think she's very, very close.
And you expect to have it before the board meeting?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, she's really close.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll go to vote on item 6.4 then. Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
No.
Kelly?
No.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. Come back up here. We're gonna go back to 6.2. Yeah, come on down.
Yeah, good morning. Apologize, I think a couple of things came up this morning, I meant to be here.
Bob, I struggled with the question, how frequently does the board review meet? Can you help on that?
The board review, yes, is that the question?
Well, there was a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
That's one of them. Go for
Start
it.
with that, Bob, that sounds good.
The board review meets when we're in session and having appeals or complaints, board review complaints. They meet anywhere from a couple times a week to 4 or 5 days a week. The regular board review in McHenry County handles the majority of appeals. We, since I've been here in 2010, it has been part of our effort to control the budget by controlling the amount of alternates that we use. So they do basically whatever is necessary to do. They do as much as they can with regard to keeping that, the need for board review alternates. Now the last 2 years, I would admit that we have not had as many appeals as we had before, but that isn't the only criteria. But, and then when we're not in session, they come in once a week. Typically, they might skip a week, but they come in once a week to sign anything that needs to be signed. PTABs, they work on the PTABs and represent us at the, on behalf. It's our assessments once it goes to PTAB, so we have to defend it with the help of the township assessors. So they work on the files on the property tax appeal board to and off season.
So maybe you can quantify for us, what does that mean as far as number of days in a particular calendar year or fiscal year? I don't care which one you want to do, but
I'd have
approximately.
to go get that and look at the log downstairs as well if you wanted to. I would say, in generally speaking though, they're in for 4 months at the average of about 3 times a week. But they do also, because also there is work that is done at home now because of technology in terms of preparing for the hearings that they have board review. So it isn't all just time in the office here when they are doing work at home. both on the property tax appeal cases as well as board review complaints and hearings that are scheduled.
Okay, so if I'm doing that math real quick, that's approximately 48 days for the 4 months. So
I would say it could be higher than that on average. If there's higher hearings, it'd be higher than that. If there aren't, it'd be lower than that. But there's a log of what days they come in. I don't know if they're logging exactly how many hours they're working at home.
Okay. So other members have questions?
During these times, the 15% appears to be high. Is there any middle ground here?
Well, certainly, Tom, but that of course, your call is on that. I discussed this with Kevin briefly, but Pete in detail. And the last time I came up here, or came in front of the board in 2013, the first couple of years they got increases that were equivalent to the typical county raise. Now, we have to go to resolution every year the board review gets a raise. In 2013, the board did not want to pass that resolution. And I just told the board, I'm not board review that I'm not going to go up there for a few years. Well, one thing led to another. And now at the period of 10 years, when everyone is getting increases, both union and non-employees have gotten typically increases every year from 2013, and the board review is not. So we were cognizant of that, not getting a raise in since 2013, of asking for 15% and not going higher. So on the face of it, 15% would seem high. I don't think it is in lieu of they haven't had a raise since 2013. That was my thoughts. I think that was in agreement with Pete that we would keep it at 15%, which was conservative given that fact. Now, again, this is a tricky situation because each year those 3 regular board members have to get raises here or through the county board through resolution. The first several years, actually I don't want to mislead anybody. In 2010, they had got a 20% increase because I came here and said, this was the same kind of scenario. They hadn't had any increase in years. So at that point, it was a little different financial time. Right now, obviously, we're going through some periods of uncertainty and everything else. But that also led to the fact that, everything's going up. And that's why, in lieu of all that, I thought 15% was conservative. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that 15% doesn't sound like, well, if somebody just looks at that and the face is right off the bat, they'll say, hey, that's pretty high. But in terms of the other, it could be looked at as not so high.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Larry.
There doesn't seem to be any issue with attracting qualified candidates for these positions, is there? I mean, we got 4 alternates lined up already, who would probably fill in full-time if there was some, if one of the other people didn't feel their salary was worth it, or they had another position to go to, or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's always the case. Lately, we haven't offered the test here, the board review test, to have applicants become alternates, as we just don't have, as I said before, the board review handles, especially when appeals are down, they handle a great amount of the work so that we don't have to have alternates. But there is anyone just can't become a board review alternate. Per the code, they have to have experience either in real estate sales or brokerage, real estate appraisal, and or assessments. It doesn't say how much, but at the same time, we did have someone at one point pass the test. This was again back in 2010. The makeup of the board is comprised of 2 members of one party, the competing vote-getting party in the last election, countywide election, and then a single person would then be in the other party. In McHenry's always been 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat. We did have the only Democrat that passed it in 2012. He didn't have experience in any real estate. So I went to the chairman and I said, I have to put the test back out because this person doesn't have experience. He said, well, I peeled my own house and won. I said, well, that's not enough. So we went back to the drawing board on that one. Someone passed who was a real estate appraiser, and they became members of the board of review. So I did reach out then to the party of the person who passed the test originally and didn't qualify because I didn't feel they had enough experience to be on the board of review. And I said, I'll tell you what, if someone doesn't have enough experience and wants to be on the board review, I will take, if they go through the same coursework, same minimum coursework that a township assessor has to go through to become eligible to run, which is take the courses for the CIO, Certified Illinois Assessment Officer. That was the concession. But at the same time, they'd have to go through that, it does cost money to take those courses to qualify. But there is a requirement for that. The 4 members, alternates could in fact be, and that is correct.
So the alternates aren't certified at this time? Is that what you're telling me?
The alternates have to have the qualifications too. But, I don't know, we have not put that out. This isn't, we're not, I guess at any point in time, someone can leave a job or someone can take a job if someone leaves because the salary isn't high enough, that would be on the board of review. Just like, we're requesting this increase, that's your call whether it's appropriate or how much of it's appropriate.
Steve?
I guess I would love to see, and you talked about it briefly, but kind of the number of hours that it entails, over a normal year. Everything in my mind, I'm at an hourly rate, and just the figures I'm coming up with probably seem we're a really high rate at this point. And I don't know how the position was determined initially, that, what was the base, the 30,000, how was that determined?
Well, it's not an hourly position, it is exempt, and it's just a salary. You're right, so if you want to make a conversion, that's appropriate. And I'll get you all the information you need on that.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just wondering if anybody would be agreeable to maybe a lower increase now, but having maybe a yearly, like we do with the other employees, a yearly like 1% or something like that. So that way we're not putting all the burden right now. We're increasing as we go along.
I'd go along with that.
What number are you thinking, Kelly?
7 or 8.
I would be more in favor of something like, in that neighborhood. I was thinking 7 myself. It seems more appropriate. I don't think we're having problems getting people for that position, even though they haven't had an increase in a long time.
So Kelly, you want to make an amendment?
I would like to discuss quickly how much we would increase per year before I make an official amendment.
What do you mean by increase per year?
Well, if we did 7% now, we could increase the pay to 1 or 2% every year.
Well,
We do the other
Well, they
employees.
come back
We
every
need
year.
an annual resolution.
We need an annual resolution, so I could,
Okay.
if that would be something you suggest, whatever you would suggest.
What's requiring the annual resolution? Is that by statute?
Statute, that's by statute.
Okay. So we can't get around that part.
So,
No, not unless we try to get the statute. I don't think there'd be much interest in that.
So help me understand, so they're not, having flashbacks of other conversations, so I'll try to stay focused. They raise their hand to do this, in terms of, I'll use the word volunteering. And so they seek appointment, but yet then they have to have certification, or they have to take the test, so they can't they're not like John and Jane Q Public, anybody being able to do this, because there is some requirements. Yet they're appointed, so they're not employees, and they have a salary, similar to a county board member's salary. Is the salary in statute? Is that part of, like, I guess I'm trying to separate employee versus appointed member, because we have so many other appointments that we do and none of them get paid, I guess, is one of the things that's resonating for me. So I'm trying to figure out why these appointments get paid, I guess.
Well, it goes back to the level of what they're required to, how much professionalism or background, experience, education they're supposed to have for this role. In the statute, it says they're required to have real estate experience, either brokerage or sales, appraisal, or assessment. It goes no further than that.
Yeah.
But given the fact that that's in there, when I seek an appointment, I'm going to want someone who has that kind of experience, and I'm not going to want anybody. And because of that experience, I think that's what leads to them getting paid instead of some other position.
Sure.
The boards of review in the state of Illinois make all sorts of different salaries. Typically, the highest salaries for the regular board of review are in the collar counties and Cook. Now, Cook's board of review is elected. There are some counties that might be commissioned where the board of review is elected, as well as the township assessor. Here, the county assessor is appointed, and so is the board of review. But the board of reviews have all, the salary in Lake is much different than the one here, is much different than the one in Page, based on typically in line with, probably what the county boards make in those situations too. They're also differently paid, both in the collar counties versus southern or rural counties.
Yeah, and they're not
So we have that
employees. Okay, and they're not employees because it really is meant to be a separate entity as they're looking at appeals and really having
It's-
some separation there, right,
It's
between
a-
your office.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
separate government body.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay, just trying to connect all the dots. Okay, thank you very much.
So it sounds like if we want to make a modification of the resolution to whatever percent you want, then any future percents would be coming back through a resolution next year. And Bob, I think you're getting a flavor that you need to have a lot more data for us to consume before you do that, like hours and time and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So I'll make a motion to amend this to 7%.
Okay, is there a second? Larry seconds that. Any discussion on the amendment? No? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One, okay. So we have a modified resolution now, with the 7%. Well, it was a voice vote, but Chuck did. Any discussion on the modified resolution? Okay, we'll go to vote then. Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Okay, myself, yes. Okay, motion carries.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Bob.
consideration.
You're welcome to stick around if you want.
Have a good day. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
Come bring food around noon, please. Resolution 610, I'll entertain a motion. Larry?
Did we do 6.6 already?
Yes?
It was part of the.
Oh, that
6.6
wasn't
was
full.
part of it. Wasn't full.
Okay. 6:10.
Yeah, you still motioning for
Yeah,
610?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Mine.
And Steve
Scribbling.
seconds that. Larry, that was yours.
Yeah, I figured we'd like to talk to Mr. Rain today.
Sure.
Come on down.
So Mike, I guess, you know, you want to, let me get this brought up on my screen here first, I guess. The digitalization of this stuff, is there, we're just looking at budget concerns, and you've been here before, you've been in this seat, and the budget concerns are pretty, we'll get through this year, next year's gonna be tougher. So, it's, to digitalize this, I mean, is it a matter of space, or do people come in and research this information?
It actually, well, there's two things. One, not only do people research it, but there's also people like us, we get FOIAs all the time. And having these digitized streamlines a whole lot of things.
So you get a FOIA at your office, you gotta go back through the hard files and try to find the information for them, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
And I believe also with your budget concern, I think this is being paid for with the ARPA money, correct?
It is.
On top.
That's the,
So,
yeah.
Just because where the money's coming from,
I know,
doesn't mean
I
we
know.
need to spend it.
I know, I know, but I know it was just, you know, I was just making it aware.
Yeah, I've read that part of it, I just was.
So, but,
If it's a necessary thing, that's fine.
Right.
Spend it just because it's there to
yes,
spend it.
oh, I agree.
It's not
I
my
agree. But the other,
idea.
but the other thing is that this has been going on since probably 2017, is when,
Bless
Dr.
you.
Majewski, started this project as far as trying to get these digitized at the time. And she had an original kind of quote that we had through this company, and it was gonna be scanned over a certain amount of time and things like that. And then, once I became elected and got into office, I started going through it a little bit more. We found obviously, I think it was 43 more boxes of information from the coroner's office as well. And we asked them to do kind of, because of the time lapse since this was originally kind of put in place, we asked them for re-quote basically to kind of, you know, obviously that many years go by. It's not gonna be the same typically and stuff. So, and we had them come out, I had them out here at least another 3 times, going through older boxes and pulling boxes from like each decade and stuff to kind of see what they are. Obviously, they didn't go through every box, but and things of that nature. So that's kind of where we were at as far as that goes. But I think this has been something that's really been on the highlight of the coroner's office for a long time as far as getting these done to help us with a lot of things. Plus, you know, it just helps streamline a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I didn't, when I read through this, I didn't even think about the part about the FOIA
Yeah.
situation and the time that takes, so obviously there's some value to
And we
it.
literally get, we get FOIAs all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense then, okay, that's all I got for that.
Carlos?
Roughly speaking, what percentage of your records are hopefully going to be digitized through this? 10%? 50%?
Everything from the start back in the I think it was 1877 to 2012. 2012 to now, everything is on computerized and things of that nature. So it's basically before 2012. We also have old binders and things in that nature that are that was everything handwritten at the time. So everybody had really good handwriting back in the day. So, but so yeah. So I mean, it's just you know, there's Post-it notes on stuff that are going to be digitized. And there's no, like if you look at the old files and stuff, there's really no set standard as far as people goes. I mean, we got notes that are on just a piece of paper and stuff, things things of that nature, so. You know, and also, you know, I was looking at saving a little bit of money by us taking these records down to them as well, because that would incur a cost for them to come up and get it. I said, well, whenever you need so many boxes, we'll put it in the truck and I'll take it down to you, so you don't have to do this, so to try and save a little bit of money as far as that goes, so.
I heard you say everything since 2012 is already digitized. Is already electronic.
Yeah, everything's electronic as far as 2012, yes.
Do you get FOIAs for cases older than 2012?
Yes. I just got a case from 1970s. Had cases in the 1980s. Another thing, actually, we worked with the Historical Society last year. They take cases, old cases and things, and reenact things and stuff like that. And then went back to the 1950s as far as a train incident in Kerrie and stuff like that. So, but no, we get FOIAs. I've seen in the short time that I've been here. I believe the oldest one was back right around 1970-ish. Might have been for late 60s. So.
Is the intent, once those records are digitized, are they going to be destroyed, or are they going to be, do they have to be stored physically?
Actually, there is a place at the state where we can archive them and keep them at the state in a secure building and things of that nature. I believe that's correct. So,
I'm envisioning Indiana Jones.
yeah, yeah, something like that, you know. But you know, our records are stored in a pole barn. So, right at this time, so you know, once we digitize them and put them in a secure place, things of that nature. So.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll go to vote then. Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Actually, one more quick question. I apologize.
It's okay.
Um,
How about
Because
this,
again, if these
vote
are-
and then you can ask your question.
Okay, I mean, I will say yes.
Okay.
Um,
Yes, motion carries, go ahead.
I'm assuming it's eligible for ARPA funds. Will this project be completed within the time frame of the ARPA expenditure requirements?
Yes.
That's a lot of records.
When's the ARPA?
It
It
is,
says
it is,
26.
and we got until 2026 to spend it.
Oh no, I hope they have this.
We did something similar, not as complex or complicated as this one with Clerk, and that took about 4 months, I believe, to get it completed, 4 or 6 months. So yeah, this will be done before that happens.
Okay. All right, thank you. We're on to 611.
Thank you, Michael.
Motion and a second. Kelly motions, Larry seconds. Tom, you pulled this one?
Yeah, I'll have the same comments on 12 when that comes up. But I had a brief conversation with Kevin on this. I had an extensive presentation from a company called Enterprise Rental Car. And it seems these days that a lot of city governments, county governments, municipalities are leasing their vehicles. And it proved to be quite a cost saving in the long run. And it saves the major hit of, since we're taking a look at dollars and we're in the budgetary process, maintenance, resale, a new car will get here after the lease, and you save money in the long run. And it seems like there's been no discussion on that. And Kevin's back there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's behind you.
So do you want to address my concerns on that and why we went to purchase instead of lease?
Maybe just first, I don't think it's fair to say there's been no discussion on this.
Yeah, we had
I look at this.
No, in front of this committee. And
Yeah, we had a discussion during the July 2021 meeting, Transportation Committee, about leasing some of the, the cars that don't require a lot of outfitting, because there's not a lot of custom builds that need to be done or anything, so we can easily flip them if we need to or when we need to. There were a few scenarios about, there's obviously you're leasing, you're using somebody else's money to purchase this equipment, so there's an interest cost to it, and that was the main, one of the main drivers of why do we need to pay that interest cost if we're leasing, if we can just purchase them. So I've talked about this before. Obviously, when we're paying cash for it, there's an opportunity cost related to that. We're not doing something else with that cash. But then there's also that interest cost, so we got to balance that out. And at the end, the recommendation was to continue the plan that we had, and sort of the middle ground, or how we came to a middle point between the two sides of leasing and not leasing, was we set up two separate funds, one for the DOT and one for the sheriff's office, to do something similar to what Enterprise is doing, where buying the cars using their own money and then trying to flip them in 3 years. So right now we're in year 2 of that plan, or we will be in year 2 of that plan, and so once year 3, then it'll be on the sheriff's office, or Rob's side. We'll decide, whether, or we'll bring out a recommendation about what to do with those cars, the ones that we purchased for P&D, and whether we need to flip them or.
You said DOT, but P&D.
Yeah, I mean, so sheriff's office and Rob Richardson handles all the non-DOT fleet related purchases, so that's where the 500,000 comes through, but that's for all departments, not just the sheriff's office. So yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So the ones that we purchased under that plan are for P&D, and these are the trucks, SUVs that you see out there, and we got, I believe it was 5 of them. So we will be doing the analysis in 2 years or so to decide whether, or recommend whether to sell them or keep them, or kind of how what Enterprise was proposing without having to pay that interest cost. Now, again, the cash outflow is still there. We're still paying for that. We still have to appropriate it in that fiscal year. So if we lease it, then we are not appropriating all that funding right away. We're appropriating that plus the interest cost over 3 years, over 5 years, or whatever the case might be.
There's still a depreciation cost if you don't lease. So I would like to see some figures showing leasing versus purchasing with depreciation, even though we don't take depreciation. I understand that. But that's still a depreciating asset over a period of time. Michael's department is a perfect example to lease a vehicle. With times like this, with money and costing pressures, I think we have to think outside the box and do some things different. So I'd like to see. I don't think it'll take 2 years to see a purchase versus lease comparison. It shouldn't take that long. And
no, and you are correct as far as the customization of the car and what you need in that car compared to what the sheriff's office needs in their fleet. Not for the non-pursuit vehicles, but for this one, it's one of those that you just do the logo and then a few other things that you add to it.
Well,
in terms of outfitting it.
We have, the computer stand,
Right.
we have lights, we have decals. There's a few things that are different, obviously, in squad cars that are a little bit more heavy duty as far as that goes. I talked to Rob about this, and I felt it was still in the best interest of our office to buy it and work on the program that has been kind of put forward as far as that goes, because of the amount of money that we pay for a vehicle obviously is less than any one of us going into a dealership to get it. way that the prices now are for used vehicles, by the time 3 years rolls around and you still have your warranty, the miles that my office puts on compared to the sheriff's office is a little bit differently as well. And I felt that we could probably, after 3 years, probably sell the vehicle for basically what I bought it for.
So that was, so Tom, just for your knowledge, so transportation didn't talk about this just at one meeting, it was multiple meetings. And you said it was 3 years ago? I don't, Joe, was it?
July 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
We started, if I could just jump in, we're starting this with the simplest, safest endeavor, and that was 5 pickups for P&D. Because
Right, but-
they're completely lightly adjusted and they got a great resale.
Yeah, so Enterprise came in and did a proposal for Transportation Committee and looked at, you know, everything outside of pursuit vehicles. They would do pursuit vehicles, but because of the mileage and everything, that it really doesn't work for a lease standpoint. But they came back and looked at it, and financially, when we looked at that whole package, it was gonna cost the county a significant amount more per year than what we're currently doing. And what we, like Kevin said, what we learned was that because we are able to purchase vehicles at such a discounted rate from state contracts, that, and again, this was going back a little bit of time, but at that time, you know, used vehicle pricing, especially trucks, were extremely high. We would actually make money at that point, because when we go to resell it, we could actually make money over what we purchased them for. Now, I think that market for trucks has cooled off a little bit and probably isn't that situation, but I agree with what Mike said. I mean, in most of the cases, you can almost, when you go to sell the vehicle, sell it for pretty close to what you bought it for, because we're getting such a huge discount off the state contract. And so that was the challenge to staff that Transportation Committee came up with, which was, okay, we need to be flipping these much quicker so that it keeps the resale value and we can get that money back out again. But transportation, we talked about this for, I don't 3, 4, 5 meetings. I mean, it wasn't just a meeting, it was.
Yeah, and I know, you know, the Enterprise has been sending proposals prior to 2021, and, you know, for like 4 years or so, in various different departments, and we have been talking about that for a while. And when that proposal came up, I mean, the only area that that I see these is, you know, again, that cash outflow that goes up front. Even if we're doing it, purchasing it ourselves, we're still paying for that up front. But we're not the kind of organization that is cash strapped either. So in a way that we don't necessarily need that cash flow, but there is a cost to it. So.
And I think with the Durangos that I'm getting, those things are always going to be popular.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So I'm glad you brought this up, because I've been having this discussion too, and I think it's part of a larger discussion. And I saw some heads shaking and stuff when this was brought up over there, but we may not be cash strapped, but we are in a tight budget spot. So I think when we talk about opportunity cost, we may be paying a little bit more at the end. I mean, it would depend on what kind of value and agreement we can get, but we're also paying for that item throughout the use of, throughout its use. So if we keep that car for 5 years, we're paying for 5 years instead of putting all the cash outlay at the beginning. I mean, you think about how most of us purchase a car or purchase a house, or if you're in a business, you purchase a piece of equipment. You lease it or you take a loan out. And and I think we should be thinking about this, and I'm not saying we have to do this right now, but I just think it's important to talk about this and other ways that we can help ourselves use the money that we have and put it back into the county versus just putting a big capital outlay at the beginning. Like DOT with snowplows. I mean, that's a lot of money we're sticking right out there, and I know this it doesn't have to do with this resolution, but it's a lot of money we're putting out there when we could be financing it and spreading the cost over the years of use and throughout the people that we're helping, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so going back to Mike's resolution here, does anyone else have any other comments? Larry?
The coroner's fleet, does it have, how many cars does it have? I just read. And is this the oldest one or the newest one?
This is the one that I'd be switching it for is the oldest one.
So is this and you go to an accident site, it's an emergency vehicle. That's what I picture in this rate. What's the one you take now? Is it a 2015, 2018?
2011.
That's the one you use now?
Well,
for that?
I have 3 of them. I bought a new one last year to add to the fleet overall because we needed a vehicle. This one would be swapping out basically the 2011 Tahoe, and then next year I plan on coming back for another one to swap out the 2014, I believe, that I have. And then basically the thought process is that after every 3 or 4 years, I will purchase a new one and then sell the old one, and it'll probably be at least the same or somewhere in that vicinity as far as what the money we're going to spend on a new vehicle. And basically, if we keep doing that over and over and over again, if we're able to sell our vehicle for what we purchase it at, and because we get such a discounted rate because of that, you're looking at basically buying a new vehicle every 3 to 4 years and not having really any expenditure.
The only other side the other thing that we learned was that our, I'll say, fix-it department is certified by Chrysler to repair vehicles, and Chrysler pays us to fix warranty items. So we actually, I don't want to say make money, but we actually make money repairing vehicles because Chrysler's rate to fix it is cheaper than what it's actually costing us to do it.
You don't lose money.
Definitely don't lose money, and we theoretically make money, but which I didn't know before we did this whole exercise.
How many miles do you put on each vehicle per year?
That's a good question that I don't have. So, but I would say probably, since we got 3 vehicles though now, it's probably going to be different than what the years past have been as far as each vehicle goes. But I would probably say that we probably put on somewhere about 10 to 12,000 miles per vehicle.
It's no money.
The reason I'm asking is because I just think a plan of switching a vehicle every 3 to 4 years seems to be a little too soon.
Well, what the thought process is that it's still under full warranty now. So the next person that buys it, they're under full warranty. Where usually most vehicles that are used, obviously they go past that timeline. It actually brings the price of the vehicle down. So keeping that within that time frame, I think it's 5 years. Is it 5 years? I think it's a 5-year, bumper type of thing. So that actually increases the value for selling it at that time as well.
Right, anyone else? We'll go to vote on item 611 then. Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Myself, yes? Okay.
I could not hear Lori's response.
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you.
It was a very faint.
It was, sorry. I'll speak loud.
All right, 612, I'll entertain a motion. Steve makes the motion.
Just kidding.
Jeff seconds the motion. Kelly, you pulled this one?
Same discussion, so, yeah, just wondered, if you guys had looked into leasing and how that would affect the department.
Sure. So 4 or 5 years ago, it's been a while, we met with Enterprise on a regular basis, and at that time, they weren't even making pursuit vehicles, so it was kind of just informational. Now they make pursuit, but now they have pursuit vehicles. And so here's our thought process. After we met with Enterprise, we looked at our fleet and came up with our own program to do exactly what they're doing here in the county. And that was really replacing cars every 5 years. At Law and Government, I said, in order for us to do that with our pursuit, that's 26 vehicles a year. We are not meeting that. But the county board has been very supportive in increasing our capital program for vehicles since we approached the board with this thought process of we can do the same thing and we can do it better. The chairman is right. Our garage has been certified for many years.
Fix-it shop. Fix-it shop.
Fix-it shop.
Yeah.
You see it in a sign, a wood sign above it. To do our own warranty work on the vehicles, which really makes sense because under a leasing program, we have to take the vehicles to whatever fixing shop it is that they would need to use. So not only would that take time and money for our employees, but right now with all of our inventory and whatnot, it just doesn't seem to work. Our upfitting is another issue in what we do to the vehicles. It's not just punching holes for lights, it's the time to upfit, and if we were flipping cars any earlier than 5 years, it doesn't really make sense putting all that equipment into a car and then flipping it over in 3 years. So 5 years is really what our goal has been for the program. Now you throw electric cars into the mix, and I don't know if this is going to make more sense in the future. We're still going to have all of our upfitting and whatnot, but I don't know what a leasing program is going to look like. We're told by Dodge, who is our manufacturers, in 2024 it's going to be electric cars. So
You're going to be really stealth on the road when you are going. People won't even know you're coming.
It's going to be something. But we're always open to looking at that. We just at this time with our infrastructure and the money that we're able to save by doing it ourselves, it just makes more sense to buy it.
Any other questions? Right.
Help me remember why this is non-departmental, why it's under the non-departmental budget fund. That phrase seems to disappear throughout the year, and then when we do our budget conversations, it comes up, and so I forget.
It's more about budget control and when the POs are coming in and kind of what the fiscal of it is. So I know that, I'm sure you would prefer.
We prefer it to be the sheriff's
Be the sheriff's office, but.
It empowers you.
Right.
Yes.
Because then we have to come, so also remember that because the sheriff's office, for example, if we were to allocate this funding just to the sheriff's office, then I would be recommending that we set up a separate budget for every department that has a car, so that they are taken care of as well. So in this case, that was sort of not that they wouldn't be, but obviously, if you circle that funding, or if you mention that this funding is just for sheriff's office, I'm sure you'll use it, or just sheriff's office. So that's
That allocation buys more than just pursuit vehicles.
We have 288 vehicles in the fleet altogether, so there's a lot of vehicles that are not sheriff's office.
And the Fix-It shop does a great job fixing.
They're fixers.
Okey doke. Sounds like it
In all
needs to be
honesty, if
a
you've never
program.
been down there to take a look at what they do, it's awesome. I mean, they do a great job. So, you ever want
Yeah,
a
anyone's welcome.
little tour?
I'll show you. Might have to clean them up a little bit.
But not only do they do a good job, but they take pride in what they're doing. I mean,
That's awesome.
and they do an awesome job at it. So.
They do.
And I think it makes a difference if we hear that, Chrysler pays us to fix them. That definitely makes a difference. I'm just trying to think outside the
Sure.
box. We have all these pressures going on,
Sure.
and so obviously, when 2024 comes along, we might, that would be a good discussion with the electric vehicles.
I can't see you doing that.
I know, but that's what they're saying. I just talked with Kevin yesterday because I know there was a presentation at the administrative meeting, and it's a much bigger conversation than 12 to 18 vehicles. But our deputies take vehicles home, so that alone poses many different
Sure.
challenges. So
Plug it in at
stay
home.
tuned. We're gonna be keeping this up on a regular basis.
Pretty soon, we're gonna have snow plows that are gonna be silent going down the road, except for the
Yeah.
scraping of the
Hovering.
pavement. All right, we'll go to vote on item 612 then. Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. We are on to 616. I'll entertain a motion. Kelly moves. Larry seconds. Carlos pulled.
Is Melissa here?
I don't see her. I saw her walk in, but I don't see her right now.
Oh, this is 16.
What, go ahead, ask her.
My question really was, I mean, I have no objection to the funding and the medical reserve corps, but since it is volunteer, and I saw that it's obviously volunteers that could potentially be responding to emergency situations, I just wanted to get some clarity. How is the medical reserve corps going to interact with the volunteers of the EMA? Because obviously they also do some of that. So I just wanted to see, has there been any coordination so that there isn't duplication or gaps or whatnot? Because when I saw it, they kind of sounded similar. You know, it's a volunteer corps that's going to be going out to supplement, and that's what I kind of understood that the EMA volunteers do. So I just wanted to get a better understanding of how those two volunteer corps are going to be meshing, or have been meshing, because I know that the Reserve Corps has been out there already.
Is anyone able to answer that?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack. Your Medical Reserve Corps has really been instrumental in standing up vaccination clinics.
Oh,
Hey!
Wow, ears were ringing.
Medical Reserve Corps.
she was listening online.
Yeah.
She's just like,
I was listening, but
Take a deep breath.
I was like, what? Hi. I'm Marcy. What's your question?
I just wanted, and again, maybe I misunderstood, but when I saw that this was, and I have no objection to the resolution or the funding, but I wanted to get an understanding, because I saw volunteer corps, and then I of course thought of the EMA, and they have a volunteer corps, and I just kind of wanted to understand, is it similar, different, is there overlap?
Really, gosh. I literally ran. So I would say in terms of their purpose and how they get activated, very similar. If you remember, if any of you went through the vaccine clinics, so we used all of those volunteers to manage the vaccine clinics. You don't have to have a medical background. I'm so embarrassed, I'm so out of shape.
Tell me you ran up the stairs too.
There you go. Yeah, and down and around. So this is to build the capacity of that volunteer base. So when COVID hit, we have always had an MRC, or for many, many years. It was much smaller, but with COVID, we were able to activate a much larger group of people. So this is about building that capacity for the next emergency that we would have to respond to and help prepare. So part of it is getting a database that we can manage the volunteers, their licenses, because different people, so if you're a nurse, you know, we have to track your license, have a database for that, and make activating volunteers a lot easier. But sometimes somebody in EMA, I believe, they could also be MRC. So they go through an application process to be a volunteer. And it could be anything from helping out with crowd control, traffic, but also administering vaccines or anything else that we might need depending on the response. Does that answer your question?
I guess so. So yeah, again, so there is not a lot of overlap. I mean, the MRC is much more going to be medical, which obviously EMA does searches and crowd control. So, again,
So ours is like specific to public health, yes. But that's not to say that we could not share or activate our volunteers if they needed more help and vice versa.
okay. Well, that helps me understand a little bit better because I was confused who was going to be in charge.
And that really depends again on the type of emergency and what we're responding to.
That answers my question. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? If not, we'll go to vote then. Tom?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries.
I'm gonna walk.
All right.
Leisurely.
We're on
Thanks,
to
Melissa.
617. I'll entertain a motion. Kelly, Steve? Kelly pulled this one?
I did. So before I get into it, I just want to, if you look at the bottom of page 176 in our packet, it's the back, the supplemental information. It says impact on budget. The resolution states that the county board will provide a $9 million highway fund levy. It does not say that in the resolution. So I just want to point that out. I don't know if we need to change the resolution or change the backup documentation. Was this supposed to be in the resolution?
It says be it further resolved.
First, be it further resolved, it says it.
It says it, that's why I'm,
I miss, oh. Okay, you're right. Okay, never mind then.
okay.
But, okay, pertaining to this, I would like, I know I've had conversations with a couple of you about why this is being done. I guess I'd like to talk about that, in the meeting, and then, some possible options, just like we were talking about leasing cars, possible options on ways to keep the highway fund afloat. So, Kevin, would you mind talking about why this is here and how this happened?
Yeah, so let me. Yeah.
You can just make that your permanent spot right there.
Yeah, right? So I'm going to share my screen. So this is the same information that we presented at the Transportation Committee. So the reason or why we're proposing these and kind of how we got here, it's on this chart, and don't know if I can make any bigger here, but so
You can
as you
use
can
the plus or minus with,
and so think of it right now, at least for this discussion point. Think of the DOT as a sub entity of McHenry County for now, just for the discussion. So think of the county highway fund as their own general fund. So this is their main fund that covers all their day-to-day operations.
It
And
doesn't build stuff, it's just covers.
right, personnel. This covers paper, supplies, everything else. The only capital items that are part of this budget or this fund is the snow plowing trucks and the heavy duty equipment that they use. Roads and everything else, they all have their own different funding streams for that. And this operation is all funded via the tax levy. So the tax levy, what you'll see there is that we had back in 2016, we had strong fund balances. And as we were, some of them were, obviously they were high, and so we needed to, we realized that we needed to right-size it, the word that we've been using, and to describe that, 2018, 2019, 2020, there were significant changes to the tax levy, and so we used these funds to, or basically we used the fund balance to fund a lot of the day-to-day operations within the county highway. So you'll see that as the fiscal year was going, we had less revenues than what the expenditures were. So you start to see that we were budgeting at a deficit of anywhere between 900,000 to 1.8 million. When we get to fiscal year 2020, we had burned enough we burned enough cash out of the fund balance that we were down to 102. We only had $102,000 in that fund balance. We budgeted fiscal year 2021, understanding that that this was not sustainable. The tax levy had to support more than your regular $6 million that we had budgeted for, or that we had levied for the previous 3 years, so 2018, 2019, 2020. So that's why we increased the levy in 2021. Just that levy purpose, not the overall levy. So the county highway fund levy was increased by $1 million to slow down the burning of that fund balance, but we couldn't slow it down enough to build that fund balance back up. So in 2021, we ended up with a negative fund balance of $638,000. So as we were going through these, we came to the committee and we said we're going to need to borrow funds from the RTA sales tax. We explained, we covered that just for cash flow purposes we needed to do that, and for operations as well, as it's demonstrated on this chart. In 2022, the year that we're in right now, we budgeted with the understanding that this fund was going to continue to decrease down to 1.7 million. The auditors flagged that, and thanks Mike for reminding me of that. So they flagged it. They say, well, that fund balance, once it continues to decrease and you continue to have a negative fund balance in there, the rating agencies are going to start looking at it from an audit standpoint. It's also not a best practice here, and so that's why the recommendation now, and this was, by now will be year 2. Once we get into year 3, then it becomes an issue from a financial reporting standpoint, from a rating standpoint, and just an operational standpoint. So in fiscal year 2021, because of revenues coming in a lot stronger than what we anticipated, in fiscal year 2022 in the general fund, we were able to see a fund balance enhancement or increase that we can tap into to fix this issue with one action, if you will. At least to bring it back up to a positive fund balance. It doesn't address the fact that the operation of the county highway fund, or the operation, it's now costing closer to 9 million instead of the 7.5 or 8 million that it was in the past. So we're now more taking into account that the operation, with salary increase, inflation, everything else, it's a $9 million operation. So that's why the proposal is for 2023. And if the original recommendation was to keep the levy at 9 million for the next 3 years, so that we were not only funding the day-to-day operations, but also building that fund balance back up. But I understand, the concerns of the board. You don't want to tie future boards into making decisions that you're doing now, or that you're taking now. So that's why the recommendation at this point is to transfer $3 million from the general fund to the county highway fund, so that the county highway fund can pay the RTA sales tax fund back. Because remember, there's plans for those funds already, capital plans. There's, the DOT does a great job with their long range planning, and so the county board has approved a 2050 plan that's already tied to all that funding. So that 3 million, the recommendation is this year to bring the fund balance back up, and so, what you see is the 1.4 million, that's where we estimate that's going to end up if the proposal is approved. If your county board policy is to keep 5 months of operations in these funds, which in this case it would require 3.7 million to keep in this fund, we are about 2.3 million short of that, even with these transfers. So that's where the 2023 levy commitment of, instead of levying 7.5 million to levy 9 million, so that we can help get to that county board policy of the 5 months of operating expenses. And I don't know if there's anything else.
Well, but the 9 million doesn't, after, in next year's budget, 9 million is gonna only give us a couple $100,000
You
towards
are
that
correct.
fund balance. So it's not like it's, when you say help, it's relatively speaking, not really helping, it's 9 million is gonna keep them neutral, relatively speaking, minus a couple
That's why we had
$100,000.
the discussion about making commitment for the next 2 years. We opted not to do that. That was left off the resolution, but we did have that language.
So, you know, again, you have seen this before, and this just, you know, kind of shows the history of the tax levy. This is, you know, again, you got an income statement, basic income statement, you got revenues, you got expenditures. As your committees, your board, it's giving consensus for these departments to move the budget along the process. You're looking at the expense side. Now it's time to look at the revenue side. If you're giving consensus to those departments to continue with those plans, you got to look at this side of the equation as well on the revenue side. And so it has been, you know, relatively speaking, flat over the last 4 years. It's, you know, now it's the time to either, you know, again, come up with different strategies of funding the operations, or and I understand that, you know, if we're talking about issuing bonds or issuing any kind of, or borrowing any kind of funds, it has to be part of a bigger picture, but
I mean, that's an impressive streak of 5 years of lowering that levy. But we did it on fund strength across the board. You know, the tort fund, the highway fund, we've done some great work, and I know you're all proud of that, but it's we kind of said it's going to be tough to maintain.
so this chart, oh, I just share that. So this chart here, that's gonna come up soon, that shows the county highway fund specifically and what the levy has been over the last, you know, since 2008 through to 2021. When you look at 2020 and 2021 is when we were, you know, when we, as we had planned, that we needed to bring it back up, where the levy, and we were able to shift that around with the overall county levy increases being very minimum. I think we got, you know, 500, 600,000 on the overall levy increase last time around.
Yeah. And the larger reduction there in 17 roughly coincided with when we finished paying our debt on the $50 million bond. That was gave us the breathing room, but costs are going up.
So let me go back to.
Well, was there anything specifically that you wanted?
Yeah, I'm worried about the fund balance, and not just this fund balance, many that seems like we're taking from our fund balances to balance the budget. And I think long-term, as we see with this fund, is going to hurt the county. And I know this, maybe we can talk about this at a different portion of the meeting, but I think we need to think about financing the snowplows, and that way we're spreading the cash out, like I said, where it's not all one hit in 1 year, and possibly issuing bonds in order to supplement some of this income. We all are worried about raising taxes and whether we have to or not. And I think if we do this in a fiscally responsible way, we are using the funds appropriately, not raising taxes, and using the cash to put back into the county. I have more to say, but that's where I'm going with this.
I have an objection to this as well. I don't have an objection with the fund transfer. I have an objection in making a resolution now before we've had our levy hearing and committing to a levy amount. So that's why I'm not gonna support it, because I think we're doing two things here. I think one thing we really should be focusing on is to transfer the $3 million. Forget about committing to that levy, because that's for the levy hearing, that's for the public to witness. So that's just what I look at it.
Thank you, Jeff. I was wondering that same thing, so I appreciate you articulating that.
Does anyone else have questions? No? Okay. Oh,
Did you
go
want-
ahead, Carlos.
I guess in my time on the board, I've never seen us, kind of to Jeff's point, tying our hands prior to the levy hearing. Is that even allowed for us to commit now before we even get?
It's a very fair question, Carlos. It's one we kind of talked about internally. And the reality is, you're making a commitment, you're setting a path, but you can undo it. I mean, the levy ordinance that you pass in November is the commitment.
Doesn't necessarily have to be 9 million. When we go to the hearing, we can.
Yes. You know, we talked internally with Chairman Kearns, Chairman Scala, Chairman Bueller, the four of us about how to have this discussion, and this is where we landed to kind of you got to start talking about this. But is it binding you permanently? No. It's the levy ordinance that will do that. And this would set a course. It would help us understand where the board wants to go.
Larry?
If it's not binding us, why do we have it in this resolution? I know you're looking for a little direction as to what we're gonna do or not do. It seems like we have to move the $3 million to come and be in compliance.
Yeah, the way, I'm sorry.
It's okay,
Well, it can be taken out. I mean, it was, I think when we were talking about budget for transportation, you know, the original resolution, which I modified, had it for the next 3 years, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. So that's why it got modified to just next year. But, you know, I agree. I mean, it provides some direction, and to me, it provides an indication of what the board is willing to do or trying to do. But I mean, you can take that, be it further resolved, out of the resolution, and I don't know that it really changes the course of what the purpose of the resolution is.
my fear would be is if we don't take it out, it's not gonna pass this committee.
And that's fine. I'm not married to this, so I mean, you wanna modify it.
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion to take that.
So removing the be it further resolved.
Yeah.
That with the 9 million, which is the first be it further resolved? Okay, so removal of that. Is there a second? Carlos seconds that. What?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue with the process.
Well, no, so there's a motion and a second to remove that be it further resolved from the resolution. Is there any other amendments to that resolution? Okay, so all those in favor of that?
Discussion on that amendment,
Yeah, go for it.
please. Kevin, I'd like to hear what you're anxious to say.
If I
Good way to read the
It
room,
seems like-
Larry.
So, you know, the idea behind that, adding that to the resolution was to help us with our planning on what's happening with the general fund in 2023. So this will just become a transfer of funds from the general fund to the county highway fund, which puts us in a situation, in an even sort of dire situation for 2023 in the general fund, because even with the levy increase, at the best case scenario from a fiscal standpoint, again, that's the county board's decision, but inclusive of the CPI increase and the new property growth, inclusive of those estimates, we are still looking at a close to $1.5 to $2 million deficit in the general fund. So we take funds out of this fund to go to county highway. That's just less funding that we have available to resolve some of those issues. And that doesn't include, I know it's a forbidden word now, but it doesn't include the additional supplemental requests that have come through the department. Some of those, the county doesn't have any option because they're unfunded mandates or mandates that we have to do. So this is just less funding that becomes available to the general fund that is going to a special revenue fund. So that conversation, and I know you have asked of us to come up with cuts, and so we have to add more pressure to departments that are, and honestly, we won't find a $5 million deficit in the general fund in your contractual commodities. What it is in personnel. So, and that's a large amount to come up with if we're doing this. So I just want to put that out there. I know it's a fair question, and so that was the only or one of the reasons why we included that, because we knew that. And I think in the levy overall, we have the understanding that we may have to go back to the drawing board with these guys, because we had the budget that was consensus was given at the Transportation Committee included a $9 million levy. So there is disconnect between that committee and this committee if this happens. So now you have $1.5 million less to work with.
Well,
so what are you thinking?
I'm going to disagree with you.
And that's fine.
So what I'm hearing the committee members say is that they don't want this in the resolution. I'm not hearing them say that when we go to set the levy, we're setting the levy at 7.5. That there's what I'm hearing them say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they want to look at things in totality, and not that just highway fund is going to be set at 7.5. It still may end up being at 9, but they just want the autonomy to be able to look at all budget issues as a totality of everything versus just a particular fund.
And I understand that. So, but again, the argument is,
I think Kevin's saying that if we do transfer the $3 million from the general fund, that's one less tool we have to solve our overall budget question.
But it all comes out of the general fund. It all comes out of property taxes. So, and that was the discussion, I had with Kelly. You can look at leasing or some other options, but when your revenue stream is property taxes to pay for it, whether you pay for it now with property taxes or, there's a phrase goes, kicks the can down the road and pays for it later, it's still coming from the same revenue stream. And unless you come up with a different revenue stream, that problem is still, it just compounds itself.
so, again, my thinking is that, yes, this is same revenue stream, but that revenue stream, at least what I'm gathering, is that it's not growing. So that's a warning for departments to say if that revenue stream is not growing, then we gotta have a conversation about the expenses, because that is growing.
Absolutely.
100%, which is why I'm asking you that it's not just transportation that's
Right.
gonna have to take a $1.5 million hit.
Right, and no, I don't mean.
So yes, all departments are gonna have to take
Yeah.
a hit if the board is, and again, this is why we set up the budget the way we set it up. The board needs to understand not only a revenue, as far as whatever we want that to be set at, but then what the expenditures are to meet that revenue. And in turn, again, just so you all are aware, I've asked them to come up with a list of things that we won't be able to do in the county, and not only that, but the ramifications of not being able to do that. So what I used in transportation is, if Joe comes back and says, well, we have to cut X amount of personnel. So that means that, you know, instead of us plowing every inch of road every 28 minutes, it's now gonna be every 43 minutes when a snow event happens because we have less, you know, plow drivers. And that means instead of cutting the grass and trimming the trees and all that, you know, 3 times a year, we're only doing it twice a year. You know, to me, the board needs to understand it's not just a cut, but what the ramification of that cut is. So,
So I have to respectfully disagree when you're talking about kicking the can down the road. If we do finance snowplows, I mean, that's $1.2 million that we don't have to put in the budget this year. That could be, $150,000 principal and interest each year for 10 years over the life of that snowplow. So the people who are being levied in 2024 are paying for the use of that snowplow in 2024. So it's just spreading the cost over the use of
but how
the
do you
machinery.
how do you pay for it? How do you pay for it in each of those years? Because next year they're gonna need 3 snowplows. So you're not only paying for the small percentage of the 3 plows for this year, but now you got another 3 snowplows. So
But that's still less than 1.2 million every single year.
no, it's not. It's 1.2 million plus whatever your principal and interest is of your lease.
But you're not
really
paying
have
for
to
that
do a buy
upfront.
versus lease before you think.
Right, you have the cash flow.
What's
You need
that?
to- You need to do a lease versus buy
Right.
scenario to even, you know, to have that, to have this discussion, it should be. in
So-
front of
That's
all
what I
of us
said.
now.
I don't know if I can share like some rough numbers that we come up with. I know we had this conversation before, and I guess the point on this is, you know, I'm gonna share the screen. You can tell me to stop sharing if you want.
Well, you
But-
know, I usually see lease versus buy, the big impact is corporate tax rates. You know, I mean, that we don't.
We don't, yeah.
We don't have that, so right from the get-go.
So here's, you know, like to the point of, if we're financing 1.2 million, we're spreading, like in this case, it's over 7 years, and we're making 1 payment a year, and we're using a 3.5% rate right now. You know, it's just a scenario, right? But if we're financing for that right now, we're not budgeting the 1.2 million this year. We're budgeting 196,000 over the next 7 years. So that extra million can still be budgeted for, or it doesn't have to be budgeted this year, which helps the county highway fund. Again, with the understanding that this is a commitment over 7 years. So the cash outflow is not happening this year all at once. Now there's a cost to it, and by the time we're done paying this loan, we would have paid $173,000 over 7 years. But that has given us a tool to, you know, and again, it's not that I'm recommending this, it's not that I'm saying we go out and do this right now. This has to be part of an overall strategy for the county. You know, just like in your personal finances, you use a mix of cash and borrowing to achieve what you want. It's the same thing with the county. That's one tool that I know we haven't used over the last 2 years. We just got done paying or made the last payment on our bonds that we got. But there is a cost to it. I mean, it's financing. So that's the argument right now in the county highway fund. We could go out and budget $200,000 and we could get our 2 trucks or 3 trucks at $400,000 each. But, you know, how soon, because of supply chain, that's a different issue. But we could do that without having to appropriate the full 1.2 million right now.
Yeah, it helps the cash flow, but it doesn't help the long-term financial health of the county at all. It actually hurts long-term the health of the county. That's all my point is.
Right.
I 100% agree. Cash flow wise, it's great. It helps us out cash flow wise, but my problem is that I'm screwing future boards with the nut of paying this off, plus the needs of future plows, trucks, lifts, whatever.
Yeah, no, yeah. But another argument pro borrowing is, you know, in government, you're spreading the cost of use of that asset over the life of that asset. So it's just different perspectives. But I was, you know,
I think we're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit here, because really what I see before us is, number one, we're gonna move $3 million from general to the highway, okay? Number two, are we going to commit to the future levy hearing, based on that statement there? You know, we're almost cutting the pie before we even know how big the pie is, whether or not we get a 5% increase on our levy or what have you. We're almost cutting a piece of the pie out of the pie, putting it here at, you know, and without having that total discussion with regard to the other departments. So that you're already taking something out of the mix, and I think that to do that, I think it's really got to be done at the levy hearing. That discussion, I think, has to really should have it at the levy hearing.
Carlos?
I appreciate your comment, Peter. I would say if that statement doesn't tie our hands, then I don't see why it needs to be in there. And to your point, you've made your point. Let's say we get to the levy hearing and it says $9 million for the highway fund. I'd probably be okay with it because we've had this conversation and I know why. So to your point, if you force the conversation, that's fine. We've had it now. I'm much more ready to defend that position if it was to appear in the levy ordinance. But if this doesn't tie our hands, I don't see why it needs to be in there. But now I'm ready to support that later on because we've had the conversation.
Okay, so we're still on the amendment, which we have a motion and a second to amend, to take out that. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
One? Okay. We have amended resolution. Do we want to have any further discussion on the amended resolution? Okay, so we'll go to vote on that then. Lori?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, myself, yes, motion carries. All right, we're on to 6:18. I'll entertain a motion. Steve and Larry. Tom?
Yeah, and this ties in everything we were talking about this morning, lease versus purchase, cash flows, budgetary constraints. Here's something here again for $600,000 for a bicycle path along Randall Road. Is that really needed at this point in time? That's my main concern and question.
The question on the need?
The
yes,
600,000
process-
at this point in time.
Right now it
is
is-
budgetary constraints.
Yes, it has been included in the plans from day one, just like the section that was completed. And at what's in front of you is we are required to bring a resolution for board approval here to seek alternative funding. That's what we've always done. We try leveraging what dollars we have when we see opportunities. That's why we're going after this. So everything up to this point, Tom, with the design included this amenity with it.
So this is 20% of the $3 million you're asking for. And we've had a lot of discussion on the $3 million. And here's 600,000 of them. And at the timing, you know, I understand that, you know, we had engineering and things like that being done. With all the constraints and the pressures on us, I don't know. That's my issue.
Well, the dollars, just so you know, are not competing against property tax funds.
Where are they coming from?
County option, I believe.
For the Randall Road project, we're looking to fund it out of a combination of motor fuel tax and RTA sales tax. That's primarily where we're funding the Randall Road project.
Do we have those funds?
Yes.
We do.
So with the motor fuel tax freeze, we still have those, we have ample funds.
Yes.
Just wondering if we don't do this, what happens?
Well, we've given commitments to the Village of Lake and Hills and the City of Crystal Lake that a bike path and a sidewalk is going to be included as part of this project. That's what this grant is going to help fund. So we would have to go back to the villages and say, listen, I know we've committed to this and you've committed to maintaining the bike path and sidewalk in the future, but if the board wanted to remove that, it would be removed from the project. And that's something that I think the residents and villages would not take kindly to.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to vote then. Jeff?
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Tom,
No.
Lori.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. We're on to item 619. I'll entertain a motion. Steve makes a motion. Larry seconds the motion. Kelly,
So I just see, the question is, McHenry is responsible for the whole match. Isn't there a way that we can have municipalities contribute to this since they're benefiting also?
Historically, the county has always picked up the 20% match. Historically, for
And I'll say,
ever since the existence of council of mayors was created, I believe.
and that relationship has worked very well.
Right.
We get the staff person at DOT to help not only with council and mayors, but with other DOT tasks that we assign to them. They're a valued member of our planning team at the DOT. And, yes, it is a $25,000 or $30,000 match. We don't usually spend that amount. Usually, we spend less than what the total contract value is, but if for the last 15 or 20 years, that's how the relationship has been.
A little background, we get bargain here. We use this position a lot. Shaylin Daigle actually started in this role 15 years ago. And in conversation with Joe and Scott, we're strengthening that relationship between the county coordinator and the planning liaison, also to kind of use some of that extra time.
Okay.
any other questions? Okay, we'll go to vote then. Carlos,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hey, we're on the budget reviews. Mr. Recorder and Mr. Clerk, come on down. Yes.
So Joe, I wanted to let you know, I looked back in my email, you should have received an email from the chairman of the Dem Party on September 1st at 8:36. That was an email giving the list and the certification of all the election judges.
And subsequent to that, we've had some back and forth. I received an email just minutes ago from her saying that she, let me see here. But the email before that was that she was gonna get back to us ASAP with the balance of the ones that we had questions on. We hadn't heard anything, to my knowledge, before just this morning.
Okay.
So, that's where that's at.
Sometimes emails get lost. Make sure you
Yep. All right, let's start with the recorder. So, I'm pleased to say there's not a lot in terms of major activity happening with the recorder. If we want to go ahead and start on the highlights page from your packet. So continue maintenance projects. So we have a few projects, the most important of which is something we call a 10-year project that actually has been going on for more
Thanks,
than
Larry.
10 years. What's that?
I was saying goodbye to Larry.
Oh, hi Larry. And it's basically going through some of the digitization that we've done earlier and improving those records. Property fraud alert, if you haven't subscribed to it, you should subscribe to it. In 1,000 words or less, you share your name and or variations on your name and an email, address or phone number. And if a document is recorded with that name on it, then we'll call you or email you depending on what your preference is. A great way to know if somebody has recorded a document that includes your name, which could be an indication of fraud, and there's no cost for this. And we are, if we don't, aside from Cook County, I believe we have the highest penetration of this service in the state. Swift, so with COVID, we have been able to move more and more of our submitters to e-record documents, and as they've gotten comfortable with that, more of them have also opted for even the paper submitted documents to be returned to them electronically, and that's what Swift is that's a savings to us in terms of labor, postage, materials, that sort of thing. So we're pleased to see that continuing to increase. And then there was a law that was passed about the removal, this is a little more complicated to explain. So you may have a covenant on your property that says that you can't sell it to an Italian named Joe. It's probably actually more nefarious. It usually had to deal with races and ethnicities and that sort of thing. And while those things aren't technically even legally enforceable anymore, they carry through the legacy of that property. And there really wasn't a good path to get those out. So a law was passed, and the law was intended to make it easier for regular people to make these changes, although sometimes laws don't turn out that way. So we worked with the state's attorney's office and developed a process that kind of walks people in a checklist, that kind of walks the average person through as much of it as we possibly can. That got some attention, and we did a presentation with the local Realtors Association, some attorneys, and some others to present this to the public. That's now been video recorded. It's on our website, again, to help individuals pursue this sort of remedy if they're interested in doing so. Any questions on any of those before I go on to goals?
Nope.
So in terms of goals, we want to increase PFA to 11,000. Everybody who comes in the office gets an introduction to it, and we hope to increase that. Integrity is also sort of a complicated concept, and this is going to be a stretch to do it for next year. While when you send me a document, I can't alter the content of that document. There's metadata that describes that document that I can enrich, let's say. And so what we, in the long and the short of it, hope to do is to take documents that don't have pins on them, and in the metadata include that pin, and then include maintenance on that. Now, getting from where we are today, where roughly 70% of our documents have pins on them, to close that gap so that all that should do is going to require, there's an inference engine that can make some pretty good guesses based on assessments and other stuff, but it's going to require some labor, and so we want to take care of some of these other maintenance projects before we take that on. Implementing Laredo Connect. So Laredo is the tool that real estate professionals use to search properties. Laredo Connect is the mobile-first app that lets them do it from their phone at the pool and order document copies and all that kind of fun stuff. So we're hoping to implement that in the coming year. Completing the HR Green project. So just before I got in office, we got the gift of probably a pickup truck bag full of old prints and documents and so on and so forth. These can't be part of the official record because we don't know the provenance of them, but they have been very useful in a historical sense, used by the Department of Transportation all the time, Historical Society frequently, and so we're close to finishing the scanning and indexing of all these documents. And some of these go back to the 1800s, some of these documents. And then we're looking at some alternate scheduling in the office to make it a little more attractive. A good deal of what we do is sort of time and place shiftable. So allowing people, or considering how we might allow our employees to work at different times and/or in different locations, and how we manage those processes is something of interest for the upcoming year. The next page I have is the full-time equivalence page. Nothing's changed here. We're down to 13 folks. I don't see that changing in the near future. Similarly, the next page, the organization chart is identical. And now on to the Fund 100 page. So there's not been a tremendous amount of change in terms of, starting with the expenditures really, there's not been a tremendous amount of change in that regard. A slight decrease, and that's just trying to trim little bits and bobs off of things so that if there's an opportunity to reduce some costs, we are. The revenue is a little trickier in that the market has really been volatile the past 2 years. And when you talk to the experts, and I'm actually going to talk to the Women's Realtors group of the Elgin area, something of that nature here shortly, and see what their take is on it. But they expect that it will come back to a certain degree, closer to 2019 levels, but the confidence in that is not high. So our revenue projections sort of reflect that some rebound, but not necessarily a strong rebound in that regard.
And Joe, what's the change in the revenue for fees and charges for services?
So
over
that's
time?
just reduced volume, reduced volume. And we think part of that is during COVID, when there were these various incentives, that people did their moving, did their home improving, and did some of the work that would have been done here in this year and this next year, but that ultimately people are going to still have needs to move and refinance and that sort of thing. So, any questions on that page? And after the automation fund, it's not a terribly different picture. It's just a different fund in terms of revenue. We expect it to go up moderately, but not tremendously. And in terms of expenses, we've worked to reduce what we can. And in the day-to-day operations, we recycle paper. My desk has its share of duct tape on it, and we do what we can to try to keep a lid on costs. Any questions on that page? Do we need to take a vote on the recorder one before we go into the clerk?
Consensus to move that forward? Yes. Okay.
All right. You should have received the clerk packet in. If you don't have paper, or if you wish a paper copy, I have one. So again, starting with the highlights page. So McHenry County is, we're really trying to take a leadership position on some of the concerns around election integrity, and to that end, we did the first hand-counted post-election audit in the state. That audit confirmed the results of the electromechanical audit, and then we shared the documentation and processes and supporting documents that we used with the public at large and with our fellow clerks to encourage them to give us feedback and perhaps pursue it themselves. So this last election, I know we all feel like we're more back to normal, and we are more back to normal, but when this election year is over, I will be able to say that we're back to normal. But this past year has been still a bit kooky due to COVID. So we had a compressed schedule, which I'm sure you're all aware of. We had a third party, some contentious ballot challenges, some that were obvious here in the county, but also at the state level. And there was, 2 days before early voting started, there was a handful of clerks and state's attorneys who were this close to pursuing an injunction to delay the election, because there were just so many, especially in the judge races, so many outstanding challenges that hadn't been sorted out yet, that the question would come, if we start early voting and you vote and then the decision comes through that says your vote's no good, what do we do about that? And so that was, and then the 11th hour, our county decided to start voting on time. Some counties delayed up to 10 days the start of their early voting. And then in significant but less sexy, we converted our voter registration address system from address ranges to single point addresses tied to pins. So in the past, let's say you showed up on election day and you wanted to register on that day, and you said, I live at 538 Jerry Street. We'd look at the computer, and we'd have, the only information we'd have is that Jerry had a range of 500 to 800 on the even side of the street, so it would sort of seem to fit. But in fact, there isn't a 538 Jerry Street. That would come out after the fact, and we'd have to try to contact this person, figure out where they really live and all that, and potentially could be a fraudulent vote. So now we have converted all those addresses. They all are identified by their as well. So now we have a sort of a dead reckoning on a particular address, and that will help us on a number of different avenues. Anything on the highlights? Any questions? On to the goals. So poll book RFP. So we have an RFP for replacement poll books in process, and looking forward to completing that in the coming year. So our current poll books are long in the tooth, and their ability to be upgraded is diminishing quickly, and so we need to replace those, and that will be helped along by ARPA funds. And then Apex implementation, we had hoped to do that this year, but with, again, that compressed schedule, it just wouldn't happen. But this is really important in a number of ways. So here in the county clerk's office, if you want to get married, you have to come to us for your marriage license. It's a 20-minute process. You may be dragging a bunch of kids with you, whoever else. We may have to send you away to come back with some other information. So Apex would give a web portal to people to start their marriage license application at home or in the car or on the phone. Once they finished all of that, they would come in, they'd show us a QR code or give us a numeric code. We could pull it up, show it to them. Is this you? Is that all spelled right? Does that all look right? And then a couple minutes later, we print it off, they sign it, and they're done. So that does a couple things for us. Obviously, it reduces our labor costs, our labor demand. It reduces the opportunity for transcription errors. So now we have, they get typically at least double, sometimes triple checked to make sure that we didn't spell arterial with 2 R's or whatever the case is. because the client is doing that. But the other thing is this platform can support other similar sort of things. And I know that, oh goodness, I just forgot his name. The fellow who used to be the director of P&D.
Dennis Sandquist.
Dennis, yes. Dennis and I had numerous discussions because he has been trying to get an improved permitting process. And so if this goes as well as it's gone in other counties, they have used it in other counties. And again, it reduces the labor impact, it improves consistency, all that sort of thing. So if it works well for us, then we'll be looking to use it for even, the silly raffle licenses and that sort of thing. So, strangely excited about that. On the following page, nothing's changed on this, but what this doesn't tell is a story that's been told numerous times before. It's hard to keep people in these jobs. So we're losing people because of money, we're losing people because of stress, and the stress plus money just turns into an equation that isn't attractive to them anymore. So while that number 20 sits there, we have yet to get to full staffing just because of the nature of the market.
Joe?
Yeah.
And you mentioned under the recorder information about pursuing or considering changing office shifts to create a more flexible work week for employees, which potentially can assist with that.
Yeah.
Is that something, given the electronic shifts you're making with this department's, is that something that you can do?
It's really, it's a much more complicated
Sure.
situation with the clerk's office, because there's so much of it that has to be done on site. Some of it isn't time or space transportable,
Yeah.
partly due to security. So
Yeah.
that's a harder nut to crack.
Sure.
We'd love to do it, they just don't know how we would.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. Any other questions on this page? The org chart, again, same as before, aspirational in terms of the bottom boxes with having the staff reporting to, that number of staff reporting to the supervisors.
And how many holes do you have, Joe? I mean,
Right
there's
now we
8.
have 3,
Okay,
yeah,
so of the 16 there on that org chart, you're missing 3?
yeah.
Okay.
And then on to the 100 fund. So in terms of revenue, I mean, there's not a lot you can do for or about that. We, unlike a lot of other counties, during COVID, we stayed open, with the exception of one day. So people had less of a reason to put off getting married, for example. So it's been remarkably consistent. A lot in terms of getting documents and that sort of thing. A lot can be done by mail, so we did a lot of that. So that stayed pretty consistent. In the expenditure side, so some good news and some foretelling of potentially not so good news. But, so when it came to you last year, because of the unfunded mandate about this permanent vote by mail status mailing, we had a pretty significant bump in the expenditure side. So the good news is that so our first mailing is going to go out next week, God willing. And the cost of that is going to be less than we had anticipated, thankfully. So that's good news. So what is still sort of a big question is what the response will be to that. So what we're saying is, would you like to be on a permanent vote by mail list? If everybody says yes, that I'll be mailing again to every registered voter in the place. I don't expect that's what's gonna happen. So we took a guess at what that response would be. There's also gonna be a certain amount of reply mail. So I guess the good news is that we're trending in the right direction as compared to the budget. So we're running slightly under as opposed to over so far. The potential for bad news in the future is there's more discussion, and this is true of, I guess, all commodities probably at this point, of paper costs going up and postage potentially going up again. In the coming year, we didn't have any way to really factor that, so I'm still looking at it being considerably less next year. Our organization, the Illinois Association of County Clerks and Reporters, has proposed some legislation to not have this happen every year, because that's tremendous cost, and not the benefit, and also to give individuals the option to opt out of receiving these solicitations.
So, okay, a couple questions. First of all, you said the county clerks is asking for legislations for what not to happen every year?
The mailing. So this mailing that's happening in a couple of weeks, the legislation is written that it would happen every year.
So would that even go to the people who sign up?
So
In
technically,
the previous
yes,
years?
but I wouldn't be sent,
Yeah.
Joe Tirio, will not send it to the guy who's already on the
Right,
list.
that doesn't
Because
make
that's
sense.
stupid. So,
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, currently the legislation says that it would, and that's one of the things we would like to write in there, unless they're already on the list.
And so that is the reason, because I was looking at commodities, it's increasing over 6 times. So you think that's all due to the paper and postage?
So you're talking about, so when you look at commodities increasing over, yes, yeah. So that is paper, and it was, some of that had been in contractual services in the 22, and I think that was misplaced. And then the other part of it was, I think in the commodities is where we also had the postage. And last year when I brought this to you folks, I said, I put the postage in here because it's a consideration, and whether or not we continue to carry it in this budget or put it where it normally sits in administration, which I think was that where that ended up. Did you end up putting the postage back in administration last year? Purchasing? Yeah. Then we could do that. But I thought it was important, if nothing else, to show it here, and where it lands is a little less of consequence to me, but just to let you folks know what the impact is of this mail.
So that may change then, when we get to the whole budget, where that meal, or where that postage would go.
Yes. yes.
Okay.
So we're hoping to reduce that. On the one hand, I'm encouraged by the idea. I think if people signed up for this, I think it would serve as a good reminder and help get some increased turnout in these low turnout election cycles. But the cost at this point is just unfortunate. Other questions on any of this? We'll go on. The next page is the automation fund. There's really nothing going on. This is used for to pay for some of the technology that related to vital records. Any other comments or thoughts or concerns or issues?
Consensus to move on?
Move on.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Treasurer?
Last one.
So,
I won't be hard on you. I won't be hard on you.
oh, good. So, looking at our highlights and goals, these are basically the highlights of what we did this last year with me. One, my chief deputy, my former chief deputy, decided to retire a year earlier. She was going to go out with me. So she retired last September. So instead of going out, I promoted within. Francine Sanderson is now my chief deputy. She's been with the office since 2020. No, 2000. Yeah, 2020. Sorry, 22 years. As well as the rest of our staff are all long-term employees. What we've done is transferred, as you can see, different former duty as an investment administrator has gone to another employee that's been there a long time. So it's proof of good, I don't know what you want to say, longevity of a staff. They know what they're doing. The updated version of various policies and stuff, we've just been trying to update everything so that it's available. So if someone new came in, they'd be able to know what the job responsibility is. Increase the investment portfolio. Well, as we know, Francine, would you pass that out, please? Times have been different. Back in 14, I was elected, pretty good interest rates were out there. Right now, in 2022, interest rates, and what this is, the Fed rate, it was increased twice within a month, 75 basis points. So the county accounts are sitting at Associated Bank, most of them. There's about 67 accounts, that's fund accounts of counties that are there. We get paid 10 basis points underneath the high end of the Fed rate. So right now our account's earning 2.4 in liquid money. Same with Harvard State. We have non-active accounts that are there. They're paying 2.4. No service charges or nothing. So that, as you can see, everything, what happens with interest rates is based on what's going on in the world. You know, we have a Ukrainian war and that type of thing, gas prices are going up, that type of thing. So I just thought I'd share this with you so you can see over the last 20 years what rates have been doing. So, actually would increase the portfolio, saying the dollar amount. Well, last year, our lovely Fed gave us $60-some million, $29 million on tax due date in June. First half of our funds, ARP funds. So myself and Kevin and Mike, we worked together, how much of that can we put and start doing some investing and earning some extra earnings and giving cash flows of this money. So the ARP monies included in that are a part of that. So as you guys are doing projects, these funds are going to be available to you and to do grants and that type of thing and have extra monies. The goals, as you can see, a transition, you're going to have a new treasurer next year. I plan to be able to help whoever it may be to get acclimated to the responsibilities of the treasurer. It's twofold. The treasurer is the responsible for the county funds, maintaining the balances, making sure all accounts are balanced with the help of the wonderful staff I've got. And also on the collector side, the tax collection, which we are right in the middle of doing right now. You know, this is my last due date this year. You know, it's very busy. If you haven't been by the office, it was kind of popping in the last couple of days. And actually we gotta get back there, is still batching payments that are coming through the mail. So those are things that, whoever's coming in has gotta learn, what the laws with that. Francine is picking up with the team building and moral boosting activities to enhance the trust within our office.
it's good. I mean, I haven't lost anybody pretty much since I've been there. Now, when I started as Bill's chief deputy, there's 15 of us. And Bill leaves and there's 14. I got elected, Lydia Morali, who's with the office, decided to retire. So we've been at 13 since, or when I say 13, that's the positions we have. I have one open, and that was the result of Cindy retiring last year. I moved people up, so I got an open position at the bottom. So, one of the things that says we'll find a way to automate processing of bank-generated bill pay. I don't know if your bank has it, but the bill pay option that you have, that's physically a check that a customer can get from the bank that is sent to us. The last 2 years, more and more people are using that. And what we get is a physical check, no stub with it. They put their PIN number, they're supposed to put their PIN number in the memo line to say where it's supposed to be posted to, but it's challenging sometimes when they don't put that in there, when we have to do it by an address. So one of the things, my thoughts are, is there's gotta be some kind of technology or some way that we can process it. So I'm kind of encouraged that for my successor to look into something like that. And also, banks throughout the county have been partners of us in collecting taxes. This year, BMO Harris, who was one of our biggest branches throughout the county, collected, they decided they didn't want to get out of the business of collecting. So 11 branches throughout the county that were BMO will no longer collect our property taxes. They were a collector since 1969. And they decided it was their choice, not mine. So that was kind of a big throw. So there are other community banks out there that may not right now be a collector of ours, but that's something we can look out to do. And it just helps, so taxpayers don't have to come running up here to Woodstock to pay taxes. So those are the goals. And the next one, we just talked about it, was our full-time equivalency. And you can see it's flat, 13, change. Then, organizational, of course you see what it has, just our treasurer, chief deputy, and 11 employees. Into our Fund 11, what we did was keep a maintenance budget. Francine and I worked on it. We had to think the future, what's going to be needed in the office. Well, my successor's going to need to get their own letterhead, their own envelopes, also paper goods. So we moved monies around in the commodities to provide that funding for that, for our incoming treasure. And that's in the expenditures. Revenues, we hope, interest rates have been pretty good. They're building again. Nice. We've got plus as it was in 17, 18. And to the automation. Again, this is basically from tax sale automation. Fees, the penalties and costs that are charged at a tax sale. Those things we've automated the sale, which is funded out of this. It's by law, I have to hold the delinquent tax sale. It used to be a live auction. We sat there and hollered out PIN numbers, and that was a long day. Well, now, the former clerk and Joe now, we split the cost to hold it as an automated sale. That way it's a lot of no transparency, or there is transparency. There is no, what do I want to say, collusion or whatever. We point to this one, and you're going to get wrong. So it's done by a computer. But sale that usually took 8 hours takes 2.5 hours. Done. And that typically it's about $5 to $6 million that are delinquent, and that all gets paid by that time. So we'll be done with the tax year by the end of November this year. My final sale is November 14th. I waited till after the election so that the clerk can do their elections, so the clerk has to be there. So sales now on November 14th, I remember the last time That's automation. Then we have passports. Passport fund was established back in the late 1990s in our office. This is, it's been lucrative. I mean, people, you swear everybody needs to have a passport. Well, I don't know how many people are, where they're coming from, but it's always busy. Well, the last couple of years with COVID, we haven't been able to do it like the normal, when you just walk in. So what we did last year, when we started doing passports, when we started opening up again, but by appointment only. You know, so it is picking up a little bit. We still have people getting passports. So the fee that goes, that we get for doing that is $35. That goes into this fund. And I pay 2 employees out of this budget, as well as an employee out of automation. And so it relieves from going out of general. Welcome, guys.
You wouldn't do another one this year, but we asked.
You can't have it. No, you got enough of this. I've been good to you. So the last 2 are the working one, the working 2 budgets. What these are, we just budget interest. In the working cash 1, we have $339 million in an account. In working cash 2, we have about 480 million, or 80,000, excuse me. And this is what we keep on, just in an account and earning interest. So back in the late 1990s, early 20, when the counties was hurting, and we were doing a lot of cuts, I was here. You know, there was, these funds were available to fund IMRF, FICA, borrowing it until the levy comes out, or the taxes start going out. So that's like a rainy day, kind of like just there, you know it's there. So if they ever had to be, it's there available to the county board. That's it.
Thanks.
Go, 83 days, guys.
Who's counting?
Any questions?
Fast, I'm gonna tell you.
I had a question, Glenda. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious about the org chart because there's a variety of things that you and your team do, even within the treasure, within the treasurer responsibilities, that your org chart only has the county treasurer, chief deputy, and then the 11 other FTEs are all deputy treasurers. Is that pretty standard for other treasurer departments?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so not specializing, but getting further down into detail about roles and responsibilities
Well, the
isn't
roles
something.
and basically, the knowledge of debits and credits, banking, because we are a bank basically for the county. So we have staff that balance checkbooks, reconcile, and we have people that review it, make sure everything's on setting across dissemination of duties. The taxes, I even do it, where we're posting tax payments in the tax software. And that is, if you come up right now, you'd see, we're still doing, due date was Tuesday.
Yes, I know. I think I made it this time.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, certainly that's great to have, people being able to do a variety of things, and it just kind of struck me to have 11 people as deputy treasurers. I just wasn't sure if there was any other, potential need for a more diverse org chart. That's all.
No, that's it.
Go
Complete.
Going after what Lori said, so obviously everybody's really busy during tax collection season. So wondering, are there things that are not done then that have to be done later, or?
Well,
Just wondering about the balance of employee work during the busy times versus when.
Well, we gotta do both. Like tax collection right now, everybody's focused on getting tax payments in the system. But these employees also, on the treasurer side, balance checkbooks. We get statements once a month. We have to balance. And then Denise, my accountant, is the one that posts the treasurer's report that you see, which is a new financial software, has it's reconciled. So we're getting closer. I think we're only one month behind now. Kevin?
Yep.
Yeah.
But my question, so I mean, maybe I didn't articulate it. When you are fully staffed during tax collection season, obviously everybody's very busy, but on off-season, just wondering, do you need as many staff in the off-season?
Well,
How's that
yes
work?
and no. Well, actually, remember, I got a 4-day work week. You know, my staff work, set 4-day work week. They work 7:15 to 5:15. When they're not balancing checkbooks, they do indexing of collector books. Our collector books are a permanent record. They go back in time. And I believe 1974 is where they're at right now.
We also do, passport increase when we're not in tax time, we make
That's
more
true.
appointments.
Okay.
So they're busy with more appointments, and they are during tax time, we cut back how many people come in for that period. So that picks up the slack. You know, we've got the investment person that does year round. We've got the banking people that move money year round. So there's a lot of year round jobs that they have to kind of put those aside
That's what I was wondering.
and not do it
They're
during
not
tax
really
time.
put aside.
They're not put aside, they're just, they're delayed and they struggle a little harder to get them done.
Anything else? Okay, consensus to move the treasurer budget forward? Yes, okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're gonna take a break after the budget reviews.
Okay, I can't wait that long.
Okay.
I've been waiting.
County auditor.
We have some performance indicators, and just if anyone needs a copy of our budget as well. Would you like a copy of the budget?
Try we're doing this way. Hang on. Thank you.
Will be the fastest.
This is the same one I was in, correct?
Yeah, if you need it. I meant to.
Next page, it says performance indicators for
Okay.
treasurer's office. Should that have-
I don't know, I'm going off the,
This is,
yeah, I'm not getting that, I'm going right off the meeting thing.
yeah, that's just.
No, I'm answering Kelly.
I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Good cup of coffee this morning. It's just extra in addition to. You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just quickly go over highlights and goals, and this is Stephanie Atten, she's my chief deputy in the auditor's office, a CPA, very experienced, so lucky to have her. So the 2022 highlights, we recently completed a transition audit of Regional Office of Education, and we are going to present next month, and it also includes a review of fingerprinting, cash collections process. And due to length of meeting today, we're going to present next month a couple of various audits. But wanted to mention that at the beginning. One of the audits we completed was real estate transfer tax internal audit, and we are still working with the recorder's office and state's attorney on some follow-up points on that. So one kind of exciting thing is we onboarded another CPA in the auditor's office. And something I was going to mention on the org chart is we converted the internal audit program manager position into 2 part-time positions based on staff that was available and the job market right now, and actually it saves some money on insurance and IMRF. And it was a benefit for flexibility for our office to have two individuals, one being a CPA and another one with an accounting degree, to assist and bring that level of experience. So invoices is something that is a big part of what we do and so important in the auditor's office, and reviewing purchases, requisitions upfront to make sure they're set up correctly in the system and that they have board approval. A lot of purchases require resolution, so we make sure they match and they're set up correctly. And just it's with the ARPA money, a lot of additional purchases have been coming through, so it takes up a lot of time. One of the things, Stephanie in my office worked with finance on developing the ARPA funds and the lead sheet through the reimbursement process. And another highlight that we were hoping to talk about is just some of our P card review over the master account, because we've been working with purchasing on that as well, and I didn't mention that here. That's something we'll be talking with you in the future on. And so just working with ROE on some transition, reviewing their internal audit recommendations. So goals for the auditor's office is this program Questica. We were looking and researching and utilizing Power BI, but really Questica is much more user-friendly, so looking in 2023 to use that for reporting features for the audit function. And then training. We have a couple of new staff in our office, so just training them on, even though one came in with significant experience in audit, government supervision of audits, just training them on various things at the county. And cross-training all auditor staff on our office functions is key to make sure everyone knows some of the duties of the auditor's office. So, and utilizing audit documentation software, we use Excel and various programs, but we want to make sure it's cost effective to do that as we become more trained, educated audit department. We are looking to utilize software in the future, but want to make sure it's cost effective in light of overall budget constraints. And we have had a lot of requests for audits, and so we are working with various departments on some future audits based on requests and needs of their departments. So it's really great that we are viewed as a trusted advisor, that we're there to give feedback and not like a gotcha auditor's office, that we are free consulting and can give advice and insight into a division for the department head. And so even this week had a couple of requests for our services. So a lot looking forward to in the future now that, you know, we're full staffed and have really quality good staff. So that's kind of, I touched a little bit on the FTEs, and the internal audit program manager position is two part-time positions, and there is kind of a progression in the office where that position has a little bit of supervisory, and so as new staff come in, they can work their way up. Very similar to a CPA firm is how they styled it, and how you want to run a professional, well-run auditor's office. And we did hand out performance indicators, and it's mostly impacted by ARPA. People are using the purchase order function much more, making sure that even small purchases will flow through, making sure that there's approval before they buy things, which is really great to make sure that it complies and that it has a public purpose, and they are properly assess the quotes and that they selected the lowest bidder. So a lot of just common business sense goes a long way with that, and expenses. We've had a lot of good results of just having review over expenses, to making sure stuff complies and makes sense, and it's not just a Walmart receipt that's already been paid. But that needs to be processed on a P card versus submitted as an invoice, a variety of things. So one of the things I think was on our goals is just working with departments and the finance division on training and educating staff to make sure they're submitting, they know we're there as a final review to make sure everything looks good, but making sure that department heads are taking ownership before it gets to our office, that everything is clean as much as possible, that they know what to look for. We have new department heads and staff, a lot of new staff, especially health department, entering things. And so working with finance on the trainings of departments on what to look for is another goal of ours. So probably a little bit longer winded than I expected, but that's our budget. We're not increasing the budget. We did have, touch quickly on that. We actually had a refund on the commodity side, which is why it's at 0. There were expenses, but it was just a timing of when we finally got refunded on item we purchased and then returned it. But we don't spend the budget if we don't need to, and a lot of times training happens a little bit later in the year because we want to make sure we get our CPEs in before year end. Stephanie and I and Evelyn in my office is a CPA, and we want to make sure everyone's doing 40 hours of continuing education every year. Any questions?
No? Consensus to move this forward?
Yes.
Moving on. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
You want to take a break now? Okay, well, let's take a 5-minute break before we go on here. Okay, we have a quorum back again, so go on to the economic development budget. Any questions?
Yes, can you remind me what we're doing with this? I thought we, just remind me.
This was the fund that we
Please.
were giving out the revolving
Right,
loan funds.
right.
That we stopped doing.
Right.
We said that we were gonna use the fund balances in this fund to pay for the EDC contract that we've been paying for the EDC contract. So we're using the fund balances in there to pay that amount to EDC every single year. And now Pete's recommending that we pay for McHenry County out of that amount also. Or sorry, Kelly was making that right, or whoever was making that.
All right, say that again. We're
Say
paying
which.
MCEDC out of that fund, right?
Correct.
All right, and then the
And
other
Pete-
thing we were talking about was,
Pete's saying to pay Visit McHenry County out of this fund
okay,
also.
and that's what I was looking at too, so that is that $100,000 a year too? Okay.
Yeah,
So we would have to change this budget.
Yes.
yeah. Did that
When
answer your
we
question?
created this fund, we also sort of contemplated having matching dollars available at some point. You know, we had talked with Congressman Underwood about minority entrepreneur program, all kind of got stopped with COVID and she's going to be in a new district. But yes, we had thought that there was an opportunity maybe there to use $500,000 in that regard. But at this point, the only thing we've been spending it on is the EDC contract. And I do think there's capacity for a few years to use for the Visit McHenry County contract as well.
Any
Yes,
questions?
thank you, that
Yeah,
answers my
okay.
question.
So is it okay to move this forward with that modification? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we're on to non-departmental. Who's taking that? I'm looking at all three of you, so I don't, you know.
Rock, paper, scissors. I guess just my comment with non-departmental is, the first salary lines, you know, it's just three numbers, but really, we present this one last because it's based on all the positions within the general fund, so that's how we calculate, this number. And then a lot of the contractuals and commodities have already been approved, that's why I put the resolution number, so, I don't know if you guys have any specific questions.
I do. I must have gotten out of this without saving it. Here it talks about commodity, there's a line out of commodity inflation. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so
I saw
when
that
we,
too.
like when we presented the sheriff's budget and facilities, was those two specifically, instead of just, you know, increasing their fuel line item in sheriff, and it kind of goes back to a little bit what Kevin was talking about, like, control.
Mhm. That's right.
It allows you, if we can cross our fingers, hope we don't need all this, and then we've got flexibility in using the dollars that are not.
Right, instead of approving.
But it allows this committee kind of control rather than dumping it all in the sheriff's office. And then maybe the fuel prices go down and that turns into bulletproof vests or something like that.
Right, okay.
So that's why, is that probably the overarching then reason why some of these things are non-departmental? Because it just seems like there are places they could go, but,
Better control.
okay.
Any discussion? Okay, consensus to move this forward? Yes? Okay. Okay, we're on to reports.
The first report is the advanced McHenry County update.
Yeah.
Stephen didn't mind joining us. So,
Come on down.
so you'll have two documents, or you should have two documents. And so the first one, we're just kind of giving you a snapshot of where we are with what has been approved, and I know it's very small to look at. I can put it up on the screen if you like.
I can share my cheater readers even.
Perfect. So, with the larger, more expanded side on your page, will be on the right side. That's the list of the county projects, internal projects. Do you need a copy of that?
Yeah, and I don't think that
So that's the internal county project that the county board, the finance committee has approved. Some of them, we're still working to, for example, you'll see that the health department allocation is there. There's still some things that we need to talk about, and we have scheduled meetings about that. But the other side, the left side of that page is the external funding. That's where the Advanced McHenry County program has been going through it. So in there, I'm sorry, on the county side, we have allocated, pretty much all funding has been
Pretty well
allocated.
pretty well tied up, as Kevin said. There's some flexibility. We put that quote unquote fence around $7.5 million for the health department. That's more than they're going to need at this point. That's Kevin and I are meeting with Melissa tomorrow. They have a preliminary list that's more approaching $4 million. So that frees up a little bit of money, but we are a little bit short on some of the other funds. So I think that it ties up pretty well, and I don't think we want to make any more commitments on that side at this point. But the bigger question is the left half of the ledger.
So, on the public projects, so we have funding that has been approved, and you'll see the list of organizations that got approved. Total is 13.9, so close to 14 million. There's 15.9 million available. So we're gonna stop here just because we want to ask the question of, there is a lot of county-related projects that are one-time projects in the fiscal year 2023 budget that I know could be funded. It could be eligible for some of these funding, but I know that obviously, we have the second page here where we have taking applications in for water and sewer projects and non-water and sewer projects, and combine all of that exceeds these available funding, or it's at least 2 times that available funding what we have been. So that's, I guess, we wanted to get some sort of feedback on the committee. I know we talked about these internally. We talked about, for now, just continue to hold these applications that we have received until we, until later in the process. So we don't, when we're looking at the second page where it's a more colorful document that looks like this, you'll see that under the second row where you see non-water and sewer projects that are above 80, these were the projects that we got. So we received a total of 10 of them that got a score above 80. Some of them are repeat organizations that have already been awarded funds. And so, again, talking more about, this is where we are with that. If these were the standard process that we have followed before, because these are above 80, the committee would have, considered them for approval. And so that would be a 7.8 million commitment out of the 15.9 million. And then non-water and sewer that qualify for funding will be it's the 19 projects in a total of 24.7 million that we have. Again, that's obviously a lot more than what we have available, so we have to make a decision on that as well. But right now, I guess from staffing side, our recommendation is to hold any decisions on these and just let's go through our budget process first and then make a decision or, what to do next.
Yeah, we met with Chairman Mueller and Chairman Scala several weeks ago and kind of faced this reality that we've got more good projects than we have money. So we need to make some decisions, like to shorten the list. Maybe, as Kevin mentioned, we have a couple good applicants here who've already received money. So that's a decision we can make. Say you only get one bite. We also have some water sewer projects that are very expensive, $7-8 million. Maybe we make a decision that no one project's gonna get more than $1.5 million or something like that to help shrink this. And then as Kevin was saying, we have our own budget challenges, and do we wanna try to assist in that regard anyway? And with all these questions, we just weren't ready to move anything forward. We have the benefit of time, and just kind of wait another month or two, even just to see how things shake out. That was,
Well, the other thing that we should note is, to the committee, is that, so, we changed the matrix by which the water and sewers were being evaluated. And we made it out of 120 points. And we changed, what that looked and how it was graded. And I think it was, none of the projects scored above a 60, is that what it was?
None of them scored above an 80.
80,
There were
okay.
several in the 70s.
Okay, so not only did we increase the amount of points they could potentially get, but none of those went above 80. So even if we were just use the same threshold of 80, that we used on a 100-point scale, out of 120, none of those would have qualified to begin with. So just I'm not passing judgment or anything, I'm just making that as a point of observation with this. And I think there was like 8 or 9 projects that scored a 0. So out of the water and sewer. I think there's that whole segment, is something that, I'd like the committee to kind of look at more in detail, but, right now, I agree with them, and Mike Bueller agreed with them that, it's just, we got other pressing issues right now than spending a lot of time on this. And I think the only key component of this is, maybe the board, as we look at the whole picture of the budget and the levy and everything, understand that the board could make a conscious decision to say, we're not splitting it 50-50. The county has more needs now than we did when we made that thought process. And basically, really it comes down to $8 million in unfunded mandates that we're trying to pay for this year. That we didn't know about when we made that, verbal commitment to this program. So this is another revenue stream that could help our budget for this year and for next year as far as that goes. That all being said, I think that all just needs to be discussed in a full picture and full understanding about what, the decisions that we're making and how they impact things. What?
You wanna go?
No, I'm just thinking,
Oh,
I'm thinking.
okay, yeah.
Oh, that was a big sigh you had.
It's like, trying to think, if I could
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
weigh in on a couple of things that are kind of coming to mind initially, and, so I would, let me just think of what's already been said. I would concur with, limiting repeat requests. I think if we've already granted, the 15 or so that are on that left side of the page, and there's second requests, I would, I would concur with not reviewing those for potential approval. I also appreciate the idea on the water cap, but I think that when I think back about our initial commitment, which I realize reality is a little bit different now, but if I remember, it was small business, the kind of the four.
The 4 different.
Yeah.
I think at the end
Not-
we ended up going away from those.
Okay.
Yeah, we just made the 50-50 split.
Oh, okay. Okay.
we had some initial
Right.
thoughts on,
Kind
because
of
of
sector.
the interest that was expressed prior to advancing the program, we probably might allocate it in these percentages, but we stepped away from that.
Okay, yeah, and I wasn't even thinking percentages. I was kind of thinking of those bigger buckets of,
Right.
Small business, or I know we've
Not-for-profit.
not for profit. We've put a lot into education, and so I think, okay, hearing that we kind of stepped away from those, I would if we were gonna continue to look at, so, the non-water and sewer projects that are above 80, I suppose I would still wanna look at those, how much those requests are, removing any of those 10 that are repeat. So maybe if there's, if there's 4 repeats, then that would mean it's only 6, and maybe that 7.7 is a little bit lower. And so I guess then to your point about the 19 eligible water and sewer projects, I think that, bless you, I would want to step back from the water and sewer. I think that came to us in a roundabout way from the CDHG commission, sort of. So I wouldn't want to continue to pursue the water and sewer projects. And then to Mike's point about facing the 8 million in unfunded mandates, I guess one of the questions I'm wondering about is we've committed 13.9, and it's a reimbursement program, so I'm wondering if anybody has started to seek their reimbursement, or if any of these projects have changed. For example, just in the other hat that I wear, remembering what United Way McHenry County was requesting, it was for staff. Well, I'm in that same kind of realm, and staff are not out there. So while they requested that money, I'm curious if they've been able to find anyone to hire to pay for that money. And I realize that's their issue that they need to provide to us. But I guess my point there is then, will they even be able to request reimbursement for that 1.6, because they're just not going to be able to find anybody? And how long do we wait? How long do they have to potentially utilize those funds, whereas that 6.9 may come back to us, because it won't be reimbursable. So I suppose that's a second, third, fifth, I don't know, layer to all of these funds is, of the 13.9, how many, while we've committed to them, how much of that is really going to be?
Certainly the housing opportunity development operation out of McHenry is thin ice.
The new directions one.
What's that?
The new directions one. Was not the new directions one?
No.
The affordable housing in downtown McHenry.
Oh, it is.
Oh, really?
After we,
So
After all that, they didn't get
they
everything?
didn't get the necessary state funding this time around, but they're planning on reapplying next spring.
Oh. So to that then, I didn't realize that. So to that point, it's like, do we wait for them to reapply, or do we kind of say, well, exactly, right, so.
But I guess that's the point. To me,
Right.
that was the whole reason why we tried to do this the way we're doing it, so that, let's just say in 2 years, out of the 13.9, only 11 million went away. We have an opportunity to look at the other 2.9 again, and either open up the portal again and allow people to submit things, or, God knows what the economic conditions will be, and we may decide to do something different with it. And so, to me, there isn't a big rush to get these. I know some of the agencies are probably like, but, the reality is, we have to look at things in a the whole globe,
Right.
with all the snowflakes flying around versus just, looking at what it looks like without shaking it up, so.
And I guess, and then I'm wondering, what kinds of parameters or new boundaries or decisions do we need to make in regards to the expenditure of these funds in light of some of the other things some of the other pressures that are coming our way, so.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're having this.
Yeah, and I think, when we all met with Mike, I think the objective of bringing the 7.781 million worth of projects, starting to bring some of those forward, perhaps in December or January timeframe, because I think some of those are very viable, very good projects that, the committee would want to take a look at to potentially commit to. So, and even in that 7.781, some of those are second time at the Apple entity, so
Right.
we wouldn't even be bringing the full 7.7 to you. But, out of those, what, was there 11, I think, is that what it was? 10? 10, I could see us easily bringing 5 of those to you, as potential things. And I will say, the one, what they call water and sewer, I think is something that is really not water and sewer. It really is something that impacts the whole county, and that might be something we could bring forward also. The ask of dollars wasn't huge, and it was something that I think is, again, something that benefits the whole county. It's not just a municipality. So to me, that again goes to the focus and what we as a committee / as a board said that we're trying to do with these dollars. So to me, those are kind of things that we should bring forward. But again, the objective was just to kind of let you know where everything's at and what we're doing or not doing.
So, question, you said that, okay, it says here 24 million for eligible sewer and water projects, but when you talked about scoring, you said only one, was it 80 or above?
So none reached the 80 mark. So when we talk about eligibility, we're meaning like minimum U.S. Treasury guidelines for eligible use of funds, not the score evaluation that Bonner
Okay, all right.
I think
provided. So there's certain risks or.
the score range for this 19 are, I would say, what, 45 to,
Yeah, it's wide.
yeah.
Yes, it's nothing I believe was over 73.
Okay, so it's minimum 20. All right. Also, did you just say January we would reevaluate these? See,
Yeah.
I just want to get a time frame of when we'll go this. I mean, obviously we need to go through the budgeting process to figure out what we're going to do. So are we going to wait until after that's over till we take a look at this again?
That would be,
Yeah, so
So
if
January?
we can do December finance meeting, I'm cool with doing, December I'm just trying to get through budget so that we know where we're headed,
That's fine. Yep, just trying to get a time frame.
My concern with a December finance is you're gonna have a different board at the December finance. So to me, I'd rather spend a meeting trying to get whoever finance is at that point,
Yep.
I may
Just
not be
be-
here, so
Right.
someone's gotta figure this out, and so I don't wanna just, here's, plan on doing something in December and not knowing who's actually gonna be here to,
I'm fine with you.
And
okay.
that was my question in terms of, I know I won't be here, so I'll just throw that out. What if anything needs to be written down that has already been accomplished, that maybe isn't, or guidelines or things that have been established? I know the new board can do, as it wishes, but is there anything that isn't written down yet that this committee thinks we need to as a heads up or an FYI, or, this is what we've tried and do you want to stick with it or not? That's your prerogative, but,
Well, I think
is there-
the staff will all be here.
Well,
so-
I know that, obviously, no, I didn't mean, right, no, I didn't mean any disrespect, for that,
Well, I
staff,
appreciate
but-
that, and I'm thinking in terms of what, I think maybe just unofficially said that we're not gonna take any dual applicants. Maybe you wanna set out, if you're doing any water sewer, nobody gets more than $1.5 million or $2 million.
yeah, I guess that's,
Because I
maybe
think
we
water-
don't.
These are very
wanna do
expensive
that, but-
projects.
Yeah, because you're right, it will be different, and so, having a whole group of 8, starting from scratch, 7, oh, that's right, 7, yes. A whole group of 7 starting from scratch, and again, you will have knowledge and experience and be able to share, but,
Well, and quite honestly, they can listen to these meetings if they really
well,
want
sure.
to. So
And hopefully they are as they're running,
I would hope that some of the 8 that are here now will be
Yeah.
here come
I would hope so,
December, so, or
I would hope
January
so,
or
too.
whatever, so. Anyways.
Yep.
Are you guys, are we comfortable in telling our applicants we're just gonna take a pause here then?
Sure.
Lori, going back to your question, I think I was waiting to chime in, that we've approved 10 reimbursement requests, just over $250,000 so far. So it's up and running.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, anything else on the Advanced McHenry County? No? Okay, revenue projections?
Yeah, so I shared this in an email. Let's see. And so again, just I am going to hide a few of these rows. So I have more space to look at. So as you can see, pretty much every or most revenue line items in there, the top ones are showing very strong. There's a lot of there's a lot of activity in those revenue line items, and so year to date and what we are using for forecasting and including analysis from the Illinois Municipal League and the Illinois Department of Revenue, we're seeing strong increases in a lot of these revenues. The first one is, if you recall, we have 4 different scenarios in on the tax levy. This is the max that the board can approve on the levy as compared to the prior years. So that includes all the levy purposes. So county highway, BAC, everything, all in one. And it, again, here I didn't outline the changes between the levy purposes. This is just the overall levy. So that's what I'm including on the estimate here. Again, I understand that this is this would be a there's that theme that I'm seeing where there's no commitment or anything to that. So, but I'm just presenting it as that scenario. There's 4 different other scenarios that I explained at the last finance committee. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I will tell you, our intent here wasn't to have the property tax discussion. But what we really wanted to do, as we've done annually, is bring to you the core revenues, and Kevin and Mike's kind of justification for what we're projecting, and make sure that you guys are comfortable and can own what numbers we're going to put in the budget.
So some of these increases, as I included on the notes, even then, the confidence level of like 100% of what's being recommended by some outside agencies, we're not using that. We're taking into account that the conservative part of forecasting and budgeting in the tells me we got to take into account what may or may not happen with the housing market, what may or may not happen with the economy. I know there is obviously there's a plan that the Fed has to decrease or impact inflation by increasing some of the rates, and I know they've committed in a way to 75 points between now and December, or percentage points to increase that, so that to help with that inflation, their goal is to get it down to 3% according to the statements that I've read. But whether that will work or not, it's yet to be seen. So a lot of that is taken into account here, because, and the reason I say that is because in some of the year-to-date amounts, like if you were looking at the 1% sales tax and replacement personal property tax, year-to-date they're performing a lot better than what we're forecasting for 2023, but there's changes in there. The replaced PPRT, there was a change in the law and how the corporation or S corporations are filing. Mike is well aware of these and can explain that much better than I can. But that's causing the flow of the cash receipts for us to show a strong increase. But we're not, at least for 2023, we're not accounting for that as that will be sustainable forever and ever. Like we just think.
Well, that was one area where I disagreed with what they came up with. Because for those of you that don't understand it, basically the state of Illinois, for corporations, said that we got a letter that basically said that if you're not filing quarterly, you have to file quarterly. So both Mike and I, we sat there and said, okay, well, how is revenue gonna suddenly increase when you're just filing quarterly versus waiting to the end of the year? And the answer we got was, well, they think that there's a lot of people cheating right now, and this will prevent less cheating because people have to do reconciliations quarterly versus at the end of the year. And I'm like, well, to me, it's a timing issue versus really, I mean, are people really cheating that much? I mean, I disagree that we're gonna get crap loads more revenue from this change in philosophy, but maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe that many people are cheating. I don't know. I just don't see how I don't see the logic behind it, but that's,
And then, so with that is one of those items there, we'll have to see. I know that there was an issue a few years back where the Illinois Department of Revenue was not calculating these distributions correctly, and they ended up taking money from some municipalities and giving them to the people that, to the municipalities that they were supposed to. And so we asked that question, are you making the same error or mistake being made for the calculation? And of course they said no. So
we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you got video gaming. The only other highlight in there is that with cannabis, we are collecting at a higher rate than we estimated for 2022. We believe that there might be new establishments coming online this year, so we're accounting for that. We did get some good information.
I've talked with the city of Crystal Lake, and they're expecting 2 retail operations next year, one as soon as the first quarter.
Old Culvers.
What was our tax rate on that again?
3%.
3%. Yeah.
What was our max over there? Wasn't there a max?
I think that's our max.
Yeah.
3, we did the max?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could easily say that's not smoke and mirrors numbers, those are real numbers.
One of our
We've been
industry
here a
experts
long
thinks that there
time.
will be 4 additional retail sites in the not too distant future in Newton County.
We did say if the one up in Richmond ever gets going, that would be huge, because everyone from Wisconsin will mosey on down.
They started doing work on the one in Culvers and Crystal Lake already. So some
Yeah, they're
construction
doing
crews.
demo.
Oh, really? Finally? They're making,
So Richmond will be cross, we buy their gas, they buy our.
And we buy their fireworks too.
right, right.
So it balances it out.
Right.
Richmond's population will grow.
You'll see, the other ones, we didn't break it down by line item because each one of them is not significant enough when it comes down to it, but you'll see some declines, and most of those are related to the, to the mandates by the state. So when you're talking about the city clerk fees, that's all due related to the Safety Act. The federal government other, that was the ICE contract, so we got some funding in 2022 because there was 2 or 3 months into the fiscal year, but obviously that's done, so you see 0 there now. And so again, even with these very strong numbers and strong revenues, again, as I explained before, we're still have a lot of decisions to make between now and the September or November conversation.
On that, Kevin and I are planning a presentation to the full county board, but we're gonna do that at the evening meeting on September 20th. We have 2 other presentations a week from today at the Cal, so kind of thought the evening we'll have a little bit more time. And then of course we'll move ahead to the 29th or the 30th for our
29th.
Whatever it is.
Evening meeting?
the county board meeting.
Oh, to
Yeah,
the
regular
Tuesday.
September 20th.
Okay, sorry. It was like evening meeting. What did I miss? Okay.
Any questions on these, or?
Yeah, so the budget review is Thursday, the 29th.
Right.
In the morning, right?
Yeah, in the
9?
morning at 9 a.m. And
Oh, it's 9 now?
It's 10.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, we have PHCS from 8:30 till hard stop 10, but hopefully done before
Oh,
then.
10 a.m.
Helps me too.
Hey, I'll change my thing. Thank you. So to me, that meeting is going to be where we really have a lot of, I mean, whatever you're presenting at the night meeting, at the full board night meeting is fine, but, you know, to me, that date is where we really start looking at, you know, what levers do we want to pull, what do we want to do, have a much broader discussion and dialogue. I mean, it's not, you know, again, I don't want to be making decisions per se, but we definitely need clear direction from the board so that, you know, because October, we got to put it on review, so we
Right.
need something to put on review. And
I
So,
appreciate that, you know, I want to lower expectations for what we do on the night of the 20th. But I do feel like at minimum, we need to share some of our good revenue numbers that we have, but it just still kind of outline the delta between what these good revenues are and what we're looking at.
And I'm not saying.
To kind of set up the discussion for the.
I guess my point is I don't want the expectations of the board that, hey, we're giving this to you and we're not talking about it again. You know, to me, it's we're giving it to you, repreviewing it for you, so that on the 29th, you have more information and knowledge.
We are still, I have a meeting in an hour and 5 minutes on the Safety Act, right? And I know that Dan Wallace had to leave because he's going across the street to meet with Judge Camille and Judge Cowan to think of it. There's still some real questions about what some of our costs are going to be in terms of how they're going to implement things, so.
Well, I'll say it here. There's maybe we don't implement it. Maybe we tell the state legislature pound sand. You didn't fund it for us. I mean, they've screwed us over, so, you know, I mean, and I'm not saying that flippantly. I'm saying other counties have had the same issue. Other counties are saying, how in the heck do you give us $1 million, $2 million, $3 million of unfunded mandates and just suddenly say, hey, you figure it out? I mean, we're in a pretty strong financial position. There's a lot of counties that aren't.
and remind me which one that is, the safety? No, what is it for, again?
Well,
Is that the-
it's a number, that's a big broad bill.
Okay,
The
that's-
pretrial fairness component
Okay.
is what is really the wrinkle.
Okay.
The Safety Act also includes the body camera.
Yes, okay, that's what I thought.
That's a cost that we've already
Right.
baked into the cake.
Right.
But the implementation of pretrial fairness is when there's so many questions.
Right.
And we gotta be careful, you're opening this up to some lawsuits.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what? They'd probably be suing a whole bunch of counties, because I don't think a whole bunch of counties are gonna be. How do you, I mean, it's mind-boggling to me how the state legislature can think, you know, for us, it's 8 million. But there's other counties that are, you know, look at downstate Illinois they're so much smaller than us. You know, the total population of the whole county is 1,300 people, you know, it's like, and suddenly you whip all this on them, and you can't raise property taxes enough to cover all that for some of these counties, and it just, it's disheartening. And again, I'm not going to me, I'm not talking about whether the bill was good or bad, or whether the things that they're trying to implement are good or bad. It simply comes down to the costs associated with trying to implement it. I'm not passing judgment on whether the intent or any of it was good or bad. It's just, you know, at least in some cases, they've given us a phase-in. Hey, by, you know, 3 years from now, you're gonna implement this, and now you can plan for it and you can budget for it. This is, hey, by the way, in the middle of the night, we're gonna pass this because, you know, Mike Madigan allowed it to come off, and we're gonna, you know, that's what happened, and so they passed it through and got the minimum amount of votes needed to pass it, and we're all stuck with it.
So when will we see all four, what do we call, scenarios, thank you, yes. When will we see all four scenarios?
I envision that the 29th will be like drilled down on those. I think on the 20th we'll just kind of like on the revenue side, and that's where it's changing really. Where we would just sort of like give a baseline of, you know, where we're coming from, but not necessarily drill down in each one of them. So that's kind of my thinking. You know, there's still a few things between now and the 20th that we gotta figure out on our side. But that's kind of the.
Okay, and then remind me of the calendar. So October meetings, then we will, when's the levy conversation?
We have your special on finance on Thursday the 29th. Your next finance meeting is a week later.
Okay.
And then the third Tuesday of October, we would put the budget on every day review.
And then when do we have the levy? When do we have the levy hearing?
Well, the levy hearing and the levy striking is all in November.
So
And we've made the conscious decision that those two go together now instead of having them be separated. So,
Right.
So we don't find ourselves in the same
Yep.
circus.
We learn from our mistakes.
Well, and that's good.
It
That's,
is. So you have 4 scenarios. What's the 4th? Because you have status quo, CPI, and growth.
Growth.
What's the 4th one?
Just new growth.
just
yeah,
growth.
just growth.
Oh. Okay. So we had been talking about debt issuance, at least I have, you know, bonds and stuff. Is that something we could possibly incorporate in a budget so people can look to see how that would affect any of these scenarios?
I mean, we can try and work on something.
And the reason I'm saying this is because if this is something that's a possibility, and it's something that can fill the holes, if people are unwilling to vote for an increase in levy, then I think that's a way to fill the hole without cutting services and staff.
I'm open to looking at scenarios. I don't have a problem with it at all. I'm having a hard time conceptually in my head, if you run those scenarios, not just for 5 years, but you run them for 15, to kind of show what needs are gonna be over a longer period of time, I'm just really having a hard time figuring out how future boards are gonna handle that financial implication. And so I'm happy to put it to paper, because then you can actually see on paper what happens long-term, and see where the chips fall, you know?
You may ask, and I apologize if this is weird, but when we talk about debt, there's smaller scale debt, like we talked about borrowing money from snowplows over the next several years.
Right.
Or there's bigger debt, like borrowing money for Randall Road, which are you looking for both kinds of scenarios?
I think so.
Okay.
I know Mike and I have a general difference on how these go, but I think just to look at the different opportunities, bond issuance is a very normal thing for a municipality or a county to do. Most governments don't have no debt. So we're kind of the unicorn there. And I just think we're missing some opportunities if we don't do that. So I'm just trying to look, just not only to fill holes, but to see what other opportunities there are.
Well, okay, but just to be clear, I thought you wanted to look at issuances that would impact the general fund or funds that deal with property taxes as a revenue stream. Because, you know, you can look at bonding for Randall Road, and that can easily be done. I don't even have a problem with that. That's a philosophical problem, but there's a revenue stream that pays for that back. So you can
Yeah,
set
we
that
can-
up,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where, again, what I think what you're talking about is going back to that revenue stream. You know, yes, we have property taxes as a revenue stream, but based on board actions, now, future, that impacts that, and so that's where, to me, it's not necessarily dedicated, right? It's,
Well, no, I think it should be dedicated.
well, it would have to be if you sold, if you bonded, right? Because
Right.
you'd have to have your P and I
Right,
payment.
and it could be funded back with MFT, or, I mean, because it takes pressure
No,
off.
see, it can't
Can't.
fund.
Well, I don't mean funded by MFT, it's just,
I mean, you
What am I-
can pay bonds out of MFT. You can use your revenue bonds.
Yes, correct, but that's for road projects. You
Right.
can't do,
Right.
It doesn't relieve the general fund.
it doesn't
Right.
do the general fund. So that's why I'm just trying to clarify. I thought you wanted scenarios that dealt with the general fund and dealt with the property tax
I
side.
guess I'm looking at it all as a whole, because right now, we're taking $3 million out of the general fund to go to transportation. So,
But we're doing the highway fund, which is paying for the salaries for the people at transportation.
and snow plows and some other things too.
Well,
So
I-
the
I'm
way
not the expert here.
the way that like so issuing like a $40 million bond to fund a lot of the projects that we have in the DOT, it does allow for us to shift different fundings that could indirectly impact the levy, because you got county option, you got the RTA sales tax, you got all the other things that are part of that funding formula. So indirectly, you can shift things around, but the caveat there is that all of these planning and everything else that the DOT has done, it has to go back to the drawing board, because their long-term planning and long-range planning has been all based on a cash basis, not on borrowing. So
Okay.
so there is that component, but can it be done and everything else? Yeah, but there is the trickle down.
We've had some good conversations today about the highway levy and, a need to get that back up. This is a safe place. As we look at scenarios, can we look at a scenario where we increase the county option gas tax to 6 cents, and that raises you 2.2 million versus $1.5 million of the levy?
So if we're looking, if we did issue a bond to fund the general fund, I mean, that's where you have a bigger problem, right?
yes.
And so how would that affect, if we did it, I mean, obviously that wouldn't be a revenue bond, it would be a general obligation fund. Is that something that we don't even want to talk about, or is that something that's a possibility?
It's like, usually you tie it to something,
Correct.
project or.
So if you issue a bond for you mean like funded to MFT or?
I'm just not talking general fund, not
No,
transportation.
Yeah, you have to tie it to some project that it's, that basically expands over the life of that bond. So if you're issuing a 15-year-old or a 15-year bond, then you gotta have a 15-year project aligned with it, whether it's a building, whether it's replacing something.
And we don't have any big projects.
Our
that
general
are-
fund is just short on operations.
Right.
So we can look through, we can go through what we've got programmed for fiscal '23 and see if there's any more one-timer things that we could
I think
pull out.
Yeah, I think if it's the direction of the board and the committee to start including issuing that as part of the fiscal planning for the county, for fiscal year 2023, that may cause a lot of problems, just because everything has been planned on the cash, being
Right.
upfront. But if that is a sort of general direction, I think that there's opportunities there for 2024 and forward. At least that's,
Okay.
I do think it's a tool that we have available that we haven't used. And I'm glad to be in that position, because imagine if we were in a lot of debt and we were dealing with the different issues that we're having right now, that wouldn't even be part of the conversation. So, but it is a tool that we have. It's
Yeah, but going forward, we're looking at more expensive debt.
no doubt.
And I'm not by any means saying we need to do this, I'm just looking at all the tools in the toolbox, and yeah, it's too late probably to do that now, and that's fine, that's just something to consider.
Well, and I'm happy to I'm happy to have them run scenarios so that we're now more knowledgeable. I mean,
Right.
I can speak what I think, you can speak what you think, but the reality is until we see it on paper,
Exactly.
we both could be blowing smoke, so,
I mean, with the, for example, the one that I can see is snow plowing, and we kind of had that conversation briefly earlier today. We can run that scenario and how that will help the county highway fund over the next 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, if that's the, you know, the way to go on that. So issuing 1.2 million or borrowing 1.2 million over 7 years to buy trucks now, and you know, same thing with the sheriff's office. Instead of paying for that upfront cash, we just finance it. We can easily plug those numbers in and how that would look like.
But
And
like
that's
you
all-
alluded, you know, there's huge savings year one. It's gonna start diminishing as you're moving out, because now year two, you're doing another, you know, you just keep doing it. At some point, it's gonna catch up and.
Yeah, that's why I think we would start with the debt management policy that the board has to review and approve that would say what that ceiling would be. For example, I would recommend, what I've seen before in my experience is we had, for example, in Rockland Beach, we had a policy that we had $15 million in debt, always outstanding. That was the rule that we had in our policy. We had 6 months of fund balance. Obviously, we're talking about a smaller operation, not a lot of staff, and we had a lot more flexibility with a lot of things. But we knew that we had a capital plan that had roads being reconstructed or rebuilt every so often, and we knew exactly when we needed to issue debt, because we had paid it down enough that we needed to get it back up. And so that was all a conscious, you know, decision by the board at that point in time. I've seen that, and I think that's more, you know, like again, thinking more of that long-term perspective, and what is this board willing to do or pay or absorb as a cost, as a financing cost, you know, because there's always going to be that if you're issuing that.
right, but, so.
I'm
Not to pick
recommending that.
on you, no, not to pick on you, but your scenario you just gave had to deal with roads.
Right.
So naturally, you spend money on a road, you're not gonna have to spend that same money on that same road the next year,
Right,
right?
it was, we had a
Correct.
perfect schedule, I'll
Right,
say.
so my problem with just saying, a scenario, you use that on snow trucks, well, I'm sorry, but next year you still need 3 snow trucks. The year after that, you still need 3, so.
Yeah.
And so.
we had the same, I'm sorry, finish.
Well, no, so all I'm saying is that in a scenario, i.e. a road, you know, that's where, to me, I don't have a problem, because you build a road, you got revenue stream to pay down that debt, and then you build another road, right? Where when we're talking about operational type stuff, the operations still are here next year. They haven't changed unless the board makes a conscious decision to change operations that will change that expense.
Right.
And so that's where I agree, cash flow wise, it helps out immediately, but it really doesn't help out long term. And that's why I said you run a scenario for 15 years, you start to see how a compound,
Right.
you know, has an issue.
Well,
You know, the only thing I can see, and I made this joke at transportation, was, you know, with global warming, maybe at some point we won't need snow trucks anymore. So, you know, at that point, then we don't have to buy snow trucks, and so therefore that expense goes away, and that scenario might work.
What do they say, 2035?
Something like that. Yeah.
In electric vehicles, we won't need gas.
That's right.
You plug your electric vehicle in your home, it saves the county money.
We tell Sandy that, yeah. Sheriff, you can take your car home, you just gotta plug it in your own outlet.
Right.
You don't need salt?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you know, again, it's all about how you implement that. I wouldn't recommend to issue bonds or debt to fund your operations, definitely not. But as long as you have that, you know, plan, it's all about what can the board tolerate as paying interest on. You know, we had scenarios where our entire 45 non-pursuit vehicles were on a lease program that got replaced, and we knew exactly what the balance was going to be on those leases, and we knew that was going to be forever and ever. It was flexible enough for the board to decide, you know, we don't want to pay interest anymore if the board changed. So we're going to pay the leases off, and we're going to high, you know, there's always that option as well, so. But it's gotta be a mix, it can't be, you know, those are operational cars that we're using for inspectors and everything else. We didn't have a maintenance shop, so that we had to worry about to pay salaries and benefits on, so it made sense for us.
One of the things we're talking about scenarios, I don't, it's being late, but we have a ton of vacant positions right now.
That's what I was just gonna bring up, so go ahead, keep going.
Well, I mean, it's just a reality. We've got, I don't know, I think approaching 100 vacant positions right now and 40 different kinds of titles. If we underfund that further with the expectation we're not going to be able to fill all these positions, that creates some savings.
Well, and to that point, so thank you for bringing that up, because that was my question or wonderment, and I'm concerned.
We already do that to some degree, but I'm
Okay.
just talking about accelerating it.
Right, right.
We always have vacancies.
Yeah, sure. In an entity this big, I would imagine that there are always vacancies, but that's what I was wondering, just in terms of with those vacancies, what is that number? And maybe it's not all those specific vacancies, but if it's an FTE somewhere, that then, like you say, accelerating some costs.
Well, that'll be something that's part of our proposed solutions to this gap that we have.
Okay.
We used to budget for theoretically 100% employment all year long. So that was what was in the budget. What the reality is that you knew, you know, even if a position got refilled again, there was gonna be a gap between when it became vacant and when it got refilled. Even if it's just a month,
Right.
you know, you have a month worth of savings there. We've started to say, okay, well, that's not realistic, right? 100% all year long is not realistic. So we need to start being more realistic with that, but still being somewhat conservative in that area. And so what Pete's saying is we could be a little less conservative and open up a little more opportunities, and perhaps even look at if there's 100 vacancies, do we really need to fill those 100 vacancies? Can we eliminate some of those positions?
Right.
On a
That's-
permanent basis versus, you know, temporary. And, you know, because obviously if Department X has been going along without personnel, you know, for a long period of time, and yes, I'm sure things aren't getting done as efficiently or as timely as they're supposed to, but still, is that an opportunity to take a look at that?
Yes, that's what I was wondering about. And with that, I guess, for me, one of the elephants in the process, or that I think is gonna come up, is just, you know, that we voted on the compensation study. And, you know, in some of the other committees, you know, there's been comments, well, we did that compensation study and we voted for it, and now look where we're at. And, you know, if the board chooses to embark on that conversation, then so be it. You know, I guess what's voted is voted. And I suppose that, you know, for me, I'm just thinking out loud here, is that, you know, trying to reconcile, you know, if we would have, you know, I don't wanna get stuck in the coulda, shoulda, would've, and but if we wouldn't have voted that compensation study, you know, there's a whole other bunch of things, problems, challenges, concerns that we would have been dealing with, and so, I'll just be reflecting on that, you know, in the next week or so until we start to have more of these conversations, because you know, I think that's going to be kind of, well, if we wouldn't have voted on that, we'd be in a better place. Well, I don't think we would be, and so I'm hopeful.
We'd be in a different place.
Well, we would be in a different place. we would be in a different place, it's just a different place, so.
More than 100 vacancies.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I guess I'm just thinking that, you know, I'm hopeful that, yes, that may come up and we may spend some time there, and I certainly respect that, but I think it's then, you know, moving forward with the four scenarios that you will be bringing forward, what our reality is right now. And I think I guess for me then, just to close the loop here in my thinking, is that the conversation we just had about those openings and potentially not filling them helps to close that loop on, well, we shouldn't have voted on the compensation study, I guess, if we're also looking at the openings that we still have regardless of that compensation study, because we still have openings, so.
Remember, the principal driver on that compensation study was to raise the starting wages.
Right.
The ripple effect was
Right.
the expense.
Right. So I'm glad, my point being is I'm glad that you brought up the 100 or so openings,
But don't hold me on
vacancies.
that.
Well, right, no, I won't, but whatever the number is, the fact that we do have vacancies and how much is that, how much salary are we not paying because those vacancies still exist and potentially could remain vacant.
Can I bring up a point? It's not related to vacancies, but real quick, so in this scenario where we're taking we took $3 million out of one fund to the other, because if we're not looking at the balance of these funds, we don't know that they're negative. Is that something that we can get put on maybe a resolution or even the budgets when we say utilization of fund balance? I mean, how would we as a board know that these fund balances are in trouble or if they're meeting the minimum final month requirement? I think it's something that would be important for us to know so we can know what decisions to make.
I'll mark that, because I agree with you. I think that would be good information to include. And,
We want you to do the research, look at the CAFR, take all the numbers, do all the math, and then
that's
figure
how
it
we
out.
increase traffic to our website. And by the way, it's just like one click. I don't know who's clicking, but yeah. Yeah.
All right, anything else on revenue projections? Okay, single audit,
I'm gonna make these very quick. So single audit, as you may know, is related to all the federal money that comes through for the county. We did have an additional finding than the usual closing the financial reports, and that had to do with staffing. If you recall, in public health, the accounting function used to be 3 people. There was a point in time there was none. The only person that was there was Karen, who left for Huntley, and right. And so happy to report that there is staffing now in that area, but for that period of time, Karen was the one who was putting the reports together, submitting the reports. I know Melissa was also reviewing them, but they wanted somebody other than Karen outside of health or within the accounting, function within health to review these. So they noted that we do have a plan in place, and Melissa has been I shared that, and she's on board with that, and we'll take care of it this year, so we will not have these findings in 2022.
okay. Any other questions?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Kerrie?
Yeah, and I just want to introduce Kerrie Johnson, and she's a newest employee. She comes from workforce, and she's already doing great things for us in finance. So we have issued 2 RFPs now for things that we want to do. So
One, and we're evaluating.
Yep. So she got in, and on the 15th, August 15th, and we're pleased to have her. And so I just wanted to introduce her to the committee, and she's been sitting through some of the budget meetings as well. So
Trial by fire?
yeah.
Having fun?
They're usually not this long.
Don't ask her how day 1 went. They have freaked her out.
Well, welcome.
That's all.
Thank you.
All right, there was no contingency. I don't have anything for EDC, nothing for Natural McHenry County. Scott's not here. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 12:24.
Yes.
Lori, Steve, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. See, lunchtime.